Chapter 3555. After being reprimanded, Wang Sheng's heart jumped in fright, but he still couldn't stop himself from muttering. This is what it is. For things like corpse puppets, if we don't kill them now, if she acts up and goes crazy in the tent area, it will harm many people. His Highness has his own considerations. You don't need to say more about this. Fong Su glared at the monkey-cheeked man with dissatisfaction, then casually ordered the guard beside him. Take him out. Wang Sheng was pushed out in a flustered and exasperated manner. For a moment, the tent was very quiet. Everyone looked at the kneeling Wang Dongping and his sister with a strange gaze. How long have you been controlling her? At this moment, Emolian asked. Wang Dongping was apprehensive. He looked up at the handsome man in black armor sitting in the center of the tent, and stammered twice. Then he gathered his courage and said, From the first day she was attacked by the corpse puppet until today, it has been about 5 or 6 days. Her arm has always been like this. Wang Dongping nodded. Previously, my sister's arm was shrouded in black qi. Then, after this commoner used medicine to control her, the black qi also disappeared a lot. Emolian nodded indifferently, then waved her hand. 2 soldiers walked over and invited the brother and sister out. Wang Dongping and his sister didn't have much confidence in their hearts. They looked at each other, then entered a tent with fear and trepidation. Looking out from a small window, there were 4 guards standing guard outside the tent. It seems that they were really isolated. Big brother, will something happen? Wang Dongsue was silent for a moment and said, Don't worry, Dongsue. Since His Highness the Crown Prince didn't make things difficult, it means that he believes what I said before. At the same time, in the tent, several young generals were puzzled. One of them stepped forward and said, Your Highness, although that person suppressed the corpse puppet poison in his sister's body. But we don't know if it's true. That's right, Your Highness. If we leave that girl in the tent area, will she? Emolian said faintly. We will go take a closer look at it later. What he didn't say was that he had previously suspected that medicine could control corpse poison. Now, it seemed that one had to reach the level of an advanced apothecary to have any effect on corpse poison. However, there were truly very few apothecaries in the world, and that Wang Dongping was a rare talent. Does Your Highness want to take that Wang Dongping for your own use? Third Fu frowned. Wang Dongsue's rights. He's right. That's right. Several young generals nodded in agreement. His Highness's rights, right? His Emolian swept them a glance. We know what to do. Go summon. His Tihuifeng handed the teacup to him and said quietly, Your Highness, someone from the night pavilion delivered news about the crown princess. Emolian glanced at the message Huifeng delivered and flipped it open to read, a hint of a smile on her face. As expected, his wife hadn't been idle. Greetings to Your Highness the Crown Prince. A group of men who had gone to the desert to investigate corpse puppets filed in and saluted. Emolian pressed down the paper in her hand and looked up at them. Everyone, tell me about the nearby situation. Chapter 3556. In the ocean of Fish Orchid Star, countless islands rose and fell. Arbor was cultivating on one of these quiet islands, and no one disturbed him for the past few days. After she opened her eyes, she first used her divine perception to sense the surrounding islands. Her younger sister, Jolin, was practicing the usage of water spirit on the neighboring island. Fairy Yellow Crane had successfully refined a cauldron of earth-grade pills, and officially stepped into the ranks of earth-grade pill refiners. She was currently dancing with joy on the small island. Yellow Crane, do you want to follow this lord out of the island? Yellow Crane was also quite pitiful. Ever since she was thrown onto the island, she had been concentrating on refining pills for so long. Her mouth was probably bland at first. Fairy Yellow Crane thought she was hallucinating. 3 seconds later she jumped up and shouted, Yes. Oh, Lord Xiao Xiao finally remembered that he was the one who was refining pills on this island where birds don't shit, and chickens don't lay eggs. It really wasn't easy. Fairy Yellow Crane took a deep breath, then turned her head to look back and forth. She couldn't help but shout, Jojo, where are you? I'm on the island next to you. Far away. The little fellow's faint voice floated into her ears. inexplicably making Fairy Yellow Crane feel that it was as pleasant as the sound of nature. Then when are we going out? Anytime. Lord Jojo blinked and made Chocho grab Fairy Yellow Crane from the pill refining island to his side. The scene in front of them instantly changed. When Yellow Crane was caught by Chocho, she was still hugging her medicine cauldron. When she saw Arbor standing in front of her, she was so excited that she even threw away her medicine cauldron and stretched out her arms to hug Arbor. Jojo. Arbor pinched his nose with one hand and retreated a few steps. His little eyes were somewhat disdainful as he looked her up and down. Why are you so smelly again? Fairy Yellow Crane raked her messy hair and chuckled. I got busy and forgot to take a bath, hee. With that, Fairy Yellow Crane suddenly felt her body lighten. She was wrapped up by a vine and thrown into the sea to soak in it. After Huang He finished washing up and changing into clean clothes, she hopped ashore. The little stoic, who was wearing a purple robe and had her long hair held up by a jade hairpin, was already waiting for her on the beach. Jojo. Yellow Crane Fairy insisted on giving Jojo a hug of love. Jojo-sama expressed his helplessness. Everyone she met liked to give her a hug. Sigh, she was so pretty that even the heavens were jealous of her beauty. As she thought, her small hand involuntarily stroked her little stoic face, and she turned to look at the grinning fairy Huang He. Huang He, congratulations on becoming an Earth-grade alchemist. Ha 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 ha. Fairy Yellow Crane immediately had a smug look on her face. She could not help but laugh with her hands on her hips. Jojo-sama felt that he had praised him wrongly. While the two people were talking, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal dashed over in a faintly discernible red robe. He examined Xiao Mu from head to toe before commenting with a smile. Not bad. Although you only advanced by 2 small realms, it looks like your cultivation has consolidated a lot more than before. Arbor was naturally quite satisfied. Although he only skipped gradual attainment this time, the ingredients and should be available in the herb garden on Paradise Planet. 13 great spiritualists. It wouldn't be troublesome for sapling to Peach Blossom said. Arbor pulled Fairy Yellow Crane away from Fish a lot more than before. She planned to have Yellow Crane guide the small pill refiners in the heavenly pill auction. I still need a few ingredients. She told Fairy Yellow Crane about her idea, spirit pill, and Yellow Crane naturally agreed. We'll talk after we get out. She said that staying in Fish Orchid Planet's 12-fold flow of time was equivalent to living alone for several years. Little Yellow Crane wanted to go to a crowded place right now. The two were talking in the room when Wei Zichin's voice came from outside. It turned out that Wei Zichin had been coming to the Pear Blossom courtyard frequently these 2 days. However, she knew that her daughter had gone to the stellar domain to cultivate, so she only came to take a look before leaving. Now that she heard voices coming from the room, she called out to her daughter. Arbor opened the door and welcomed her mother in. She introduced Fairy Yellow Crane and said a few words. Li Ye's figure suddenly appeared at the door. Crown Princess, the Yi Pavilion sent news. Arbor raised her brows. She knew Li Ye's character. She wouldn't bother her at such a time, unless it was something extremely important. Thus she nodded and let her in. Li Yi handed the message to Arbor and said with a strange expression, "It's news about that god-grade pill refiner, Shawnee Su." Arbor was slightly taken aback. That god-grade pill refiner shouldn't have anything to do with her. Why would Li Yi specially pass this news to her at such a time? Puzzled, Arbor lowered her head to read the message. There were only a few lines on the paper, but Arbor's expression turned cold. A few days ago, when that pill refiner left the capital, our people didn't pay much attention to her. However, we discovered that her route was becoming more and more similar to the army's. We couldn't help but be curious. Li Yi pursed her lips, her expression carrying a hint of mockery. As expected, she's following the path of His Highness the Crown Prince's group. Calculating the time, she should be near the army's encampment, Grey Ping Village. Wei Zichin was astonished and couldn't help but interrupt. Which pill refiner? Why did she follow Murphy to Huiping Village, which was so far away? Could it be that the great emperor sent her to assist Xiaoma? No. His Majesty was not that bored. There are alchemists and pharmacists in the army. We don't lack anything, Arbor said coldly. She went there on her own accord. His motive was obvious. He wanted to make his presence known in front of Jojo's run. Previously, Jojo's Lotus had already firmly rejected this woman from following the army. Who would have thought that she would be so bold as to follow them all the way? Crown Prince Consort. Should we send someone over to teach this woman, who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, a lesson? Li Yi asked expressionlessly with a taut face. Wei Ziqin looked at her, and then at her daughter's stoic face. Inexplicably, he felt that this master and servant pair were actually what a perfect fit. His daughter was already expressionless. Why did he send another expressionless shadow guard to her? There's no need for us to do anything. Arbor shook his head indifferently. In any case, Jojo's run would teach this self-righteous fellow a good lesson. The little fellow suppressed a small fire in her heart as she stood up with a taut face. Disgraceful thing. She thought that she was chasing after her husband from 1,000 miles away. She actually dared to chase after Jojo's run for no reason. Oh right. That pill refiner Dan even came to look for the crown princess previously, Li Yi suddenly said. Did she? Wei Ziqin was bewildered. Chapter 3558. Yes, Li Yi expressionlessly said. That day, everyone went to catch up on sleep after eating breakfast. They slept the entire afternoon, and only woke up very late to eat. That did seem to be the case. It was the day after the Qin estate was bombed, right? Wei Ziqin thought for a moment before nodding. It should be the day Jojo went into closed-door cultivation. Arbor humphed. She must be exaggerating to scare me. Li Yi nodded. Crown Princess. Then we're just going to let her chase him into the army? And disturb His Highness? Arbor pursed her lips. We have to see Jojo's lotus first. Wei Ziqin smiled as she grasped her daughter's hand. All right, Jojo, let's not talk about this. Let's go eat. You were in closed-door cultivation for so long, but you didn't even get to drink a sip of soup. The mother and daughter pair called for the little yellow crane to leave the room. At the same time, 500 kilometers away, at the army's encampment in Huiping village, Huifeng blocked the two women with a smile and said with an indifferent gaze, Apologies, His Highness is currently discussing matters with several generals in the tent, so it's not convenient for him to receive Alchemist Dan. Alchemist Dan, please return. Saint-Clothed Sue stood in front of Huifeng. Her servant girl was following behind her, holding a bowl of something. It looked like she was here to deliver a tonic to His Highness. Huifeng swept a glance at the stew bowl, but he still blocked Saint-Clothed Sue with a beaming smile. Saint-Clothed Sue wasn't angry and nodded very politely at Huifeng. Little brother, since His Highness is busy with official business, then I'll have to trouble little brother to deliver this bowl of snow lotus seed soup to His Highness. Huifeng glanced at her with a spurious smile and shook his head. Apologies, Alchemist Dan. His Highness's diet is specially prepared by a physician. For safety reasons, he can't casually consume food from outside. Please forgive me, Alchemist Dan. Saint-Clothed Sue's smiling face stiffened slightly. She didn't say anything, but the little girl behind her, Meilon, couldn't help but shout. Hey, how can you say that? Are you saying that our Alchemist Dan will poison the snow lotus seed soup? Meilon. Single-Clothed Sue scolded softly. Not only did these words not make Meilon shut up, but it also aroused the little girl's anger like a mother hen protecting her chicks. Meilon held the tray and stomped over to the single-robed Sue, wishing for nothing more than to throw the tray at Huifeng. How dare you be so rude to our young miss? Meilon shouted in exasperation. This is a soup that our miss personally made with fresh snow lotus. Huifeng couldn't help rolling his eyes. Was there something wrong with this master and servant pair? If he dared to send this bowl of soup in today, the news of the night pavilion would be delivered to the crown princess tomorrow, and he would not be able to live a good life. Besides, perhaps before the little crown princess took his life, the crown prince had already found him an eyesore and slapped him to death. He simply didn't want face when he was given it, and insisted on playing the role of bad cop. Huifeng was just about to harshly reprimand this master and servant pair with a stern expression. On the other side, third young master Fu lifted the curtain and stood at the entrance with a spurious smile. I was wondering who it was. So it's Alchemist Dan. Third Fu curled his lips and cast an indifferent glance at Single-Clothed Sue. Interesting. This woman actually chased him all the way to Greyfield Village, and now wanted to enter his room and enjoy the benefits of being in a favorable position. Did she really think that the little fiend in the capital was just a decoration? Third Fu couldn't help but shake his head. As expected, this alchemist Dan before him was very bold and skilled. Chapter 3559. However, with her reputation as a god-level alchemist, it was true that a large group of cultivators would flock to her like a flock of ducks. It was no wonder that she was so fearless in doing things. She looked smart, but the way she did things was rather out of line. Third Fu shook his head again. Alchemist Shan, His Highness hopes that if you have time, you can help the commoners in the commoner district. They were hungry a while ago, so please help them check on their stomach and intestines, and see if they have any injuries. Okay. Shan Isu nodded gently and agreed. Third Young Master Fu, please tell His Highness not to worry. Shan Isu will definitely do her best to help him. Third Fu did not correct him. He simply nodded and went back into the tent. In any case, he could just send her far away. As for the diagnosis, let her be. If she was willing, then she could help the military doctors. If she was unwilling, then it was fine. There were enough alchemists and doctors in the military anyway. Miss, why are you so easy to talk to? If not for the fact that the soup in her hand was precious, Mei Lan, the little maid beside Shan Isu, would really want to smash this bowl of soup. Her miss had worked hard to make this soup, but His Highness the Crown Prince did not appreciate it at all. It must have been hard for Miss to be so good-natured and not be angry at all. She actually agreed to that Third Young Master Fu's words and ran over to treat those dirty commoners? What kind of joke was this? Mei Lan, who followed Shan Isu to the commoners' resting area, had a disdainful expression on her face. This commoners' resting area was still a short distance away from the army's encampment. Before His Highness the Crown Prince had arrived, the remaining commoners had used the local materials, rocks, and sand to build a circle of low earth walls around them. The small earth walls barely reached the women's waists. If they huddled behind the sand walls, they could at least shelter themselves from the wind and sand. If he wanted to resist the corpse puppet, he could forget about it. There were also people who built a few holes behind the small mud wall, which could allow the children and the weak women to hide in. The environment was harsh and food was scarce. After so many days of fierce fighting, these people's bodies were already exhausted. If His Highness the Crown Prince had not led the army over and temporarily blocked the waves of zombies outside, perhaps the remaining people would have already been eaten by the zombies. It's so dirty. When Mei Lan passed by a child who was sitting outside the sand wall and looking at her with dull eyes, she waved her hand twice and covered her nose with a look of disgust. The woman beside the child hurriedly hugged her child and looked at them warily. Sue didn't seem to mind the dirt. She squatted down and didn't care about the mint green long skirt. It dragged on the ground and was dusty from the sand. Is your child a little feverish? I noticed that his complexion doesn't seem right. Give me your hand. Shan Isu smiled gently. That smile made the woman holding the child let down her guard a little, and she handed the child's hand to Shan Isu. After Shan Isu took the child's pulse, she smiled and said, "It's nothing serious. Let the child take this cold and heat pill, and he will be fine after a while." The woman took it suspiciously and watched the pretty woman leave. Sue led Mei Lan, who was pouting and complaining, to stroll around the civilian district. She specifically picked 2 or 3 children to look at before leading Mei Lan back to her own tent. Chapter 3560. Alchemist Dan strolled around the resting area twice and checked on the 3 children. They were only suffering from a lack of water and food, and their bodies were a little unwell. There weren't any major issues, so she went back. Dark Current was sitting at a table on the side, not looking proper either. He was currently telling Prince Emo about the scene he saw when he followed Dan Isu. After saying a bunch of things, he even pursed his lips in disdain when he was done. She really can't compare to our Crown Princess Consort's eagerness for success and instant benefits. If the Crown Princess was here, she would have finished diagnosing those children and women long ago. And she would have even distributed the medicine. Guifeng irritably glared at him and patted his head with his paw. She's not worthy of being mentioned in the same breath as the Crown Princess. Dark Current kicked off the table and said with a grin, "Your Highness, Why don't you let this subordinate pretend to be a zombie and scare those two irritating fools away? Guifeng rolled his eyes. You've really gotten addicted to pretending to be a zombie back on Seacombe Planet, haven't you? Ha! Don't tell me that I scared Consort Zheng so much that she couldn't get out of bed for half a month when I showed up in front of her. Emolian coughed lightly and set down the cup in her hand. She looked at him seriously. That was because this highness was young and frivolous. Everyone. They didn't see this lord being that old and steady now. Thankfully, the emperor of the divine province wasn't as muddle-headed as the old great king of the Mo kingdom. Otherwise, wouldn't he have ended up being tricked by you? Let's go to the commoners' area to take a look. Emolian couldn't be bothered with these brats, and got up to walk out of the tent. The group had just arrived at the commoners' area when they were surrounded by a group of excited commoners who knelt and kowtowed to them. After seeing the reinforcements brought by Prince Mo, the emotions that they had been suppressing for the past few days were all released. Right now, their hearts were full of reverence for His Highness the Crown Prince of the Divine Province, who was like a divine soldier descending upon them. Emolian raised his hands and pressed them down slightly. Only then did the clamor quieten down slightly. Give everyone the food and water first. Emolian turned around and ordered. Guifeng nodded, and immediately led his men to the side. A storage talisman popped out of his hand, and a moment later, he took out a large pile of food and water, and had his subordinates distribute them to everyone. The adults could hardly believe what they were seeing when the children grabbed the winter fruit and started to chew on it. His Highness the Crown Prince actually brought such a sumptuous spread of food and fruits. Thank you, Your Highness. If you hadn't brought people to save us, I really don't know what would have happened. I am Wang Yifu, the village chief of Huiping Village. Thank you for your generous assistance. Emolian glanced at him. Village Chief Wang was probably one of those people who had awakened a strength-type special ability. Although his face was gray, he seemed to be in good spirits. Miss, His Highness the Crown Prince brought some people to distribute food and fruits in the civilian area. Shawnee Su, who was leaning on the short table, was stunned for a moment before he quickly stood up. Let's go out and have a look. If she had known that His Highness the Crown Prince valued those lowly commoners so much, she would have stayed there. Alchemist Dan was secretly vexed. On the other side, Arbor, who was far away in Dragon Flame City, received another letter from family head Mu. This time, the letter mentioned that it had been some time since the last clan competition, and Chaoyang Pavilion was open for business within a month after the competition. If Arbor still didn't return to the Mu residence, it would be equivalent to forfeiting the competition. This was a blatant threat. Chapter 3561. Arbor slapped the letter on the table and jumped up from the stool. What kind of joke was this? The Chaoyang Pavilion Award belonged to her in the first place, so she naturally couldn't just let it go like this. It wasn't like she was afraid of the Mu family and didn't dare to return. She just didn't want to go back and play those schemes with them. Crown Princess, that messenger manservant is still waiting outside for your reply. Kai Chi pursed her lips and couldn't help but grumble. He really didn't give up. In order to obtain the Crown Princess's reply, he would rather stand outside under the scorching sun and wait. Arbor's little face instantly tensed up, and she said in displeasure, "Go and reply to him. Tell him that I will return tomorrow. Tell him that he doesn't need to wait outside the door." Yes. Kai Chi came back in not long after she left. She puffed up her cheeks and said to Arbor, "That manservant from the Mu family is really a strange person. I made it clear to him according to the Crown Princess's instructions, but he still didn't want to leave. He said that he will wait until tomorrow to lead the way for the Crown Princess." Arbor couldn't help but sneer. How much did Mu Jingfeng want her to return to the Mu family? She had already agreed to return, but he was still worried and insisted on leaving a manservant at the door as a decoration. It was simply baffling. Arbor had already made up her mind to return to the Mu family to rob them tomorrow. Since they invited her again and again with great enthusiasm, how could she not go? On the other side, Third Fu and Village Chief Wang were discussing how to break out of the zombie nest tomorrow. Village Chief Wang, gather the old, weak, women, children, and injured people in the village first. Prince Emo had many storage talismans, but most of them were filled with food, water, medicine, swords, armor, and so on. The remaining space should be enough to store a few hundred old, weak, women, and children. These people didn't have much fighting power. If they were left outside, they would just be food for the zombies. It was better to store them, so that they wouldn't cause trouble during the battle. As for those young adults, they naturally had to fight alongside the troops. However, Prince Emo wouldn't mistreat them. He asked Fu San to distribute the armor and weapons, so that these people would have something to rely on. Young Master Fu. While Third Fu was discussing with the village chief, he saw the single-clothed Su and the little girl Mei Lan walking over from afar. Fu San glanced at her and nodded slightly with an indifferent expression. "Alchemist Dan, food is being distributed here, so it's a little chaotic. You should go back to your tent and rest first." "It's okay." Shani Su smiled gently. "I can help too." Third Fu frowned slightly and turned to look at Dark Current, Huifeng, and the others who were currently distributing food. He said with an indifferent expression, "We already have enough people to distribute food, so we don't dare to trouble Alchemist Dan." "Young Master Fu, did I do something wrong?" Shani Su could not help but ask when she saw Third Fu's cold attitude towards her. Mei Lan, who was standing behind her, was so angry that her stomach was about to explode. These past few days had truly been sullen enough. Ever since she was given the cold shoulder at the Chiao residence that day, she felt that everything was very unpleasant. No matter who she met, no one gave her and her servant a good attitude. Even a few page boys dared to give her miss a hard time. The page boys that Mei Lan was referring to were Huifeng, Dark Current, and the others. Third Fu smiled sardonically. "Alchemist Dan came all the way here to help, so the entire army is very grateful. However, we won't trouble Alchemist Dan with the rough work of distributing food." Chapter 3562. Shani Su frowned and wanted to say something, but when she looked up, she saw Emolian leading a group of people over from the sand wall. Her eyes couldn't help but light up, and she walked towards Prince Emo with small steps. However, the Crown Prince was surrounded by many people. Not only could she not get close, she was also accidentally pushed to the side. Mei Lan hurried forward to support her young miss. She glared angrily and used her elbow to accidentally push away her young miss's undercurrent. "Greetings to your highness the Crown Prince." Before Shan Isu could finish her sentence, she saw Crown Prince Emo walking past her while being escorted by people. He didn't even spare her a glance from the corner of his eye. Mei Lan helped her young miss up. Her heart and lungs were about to explode. "Young miss, His Highness must have done it on purpose." How could he not see such a big living person standing here? Shan Yisu bit her lip and sighed. Forget it, time will reveal a person's heart. He just doesn't understand me now. It should be better in a while. When Shan Yisu said this, she also felt that she lacked confidence. In fact, since they met, she had seen Prince Emo a total of 3 times. Moreover, His Highness the Crown Prince had never spoken to her directly. However, the more it was like this, the more unconvinced Shan Yisu felt. She had traveled through the 3 states in the past, and had never seen a prince, or imperial grandson, who didn't take her seriously like this. Take His Highness the Crown Prince of Zhangzhou, Rong Li for example. Didn't he prostrate himself at her feet, and hate that he couldn't spend time with her? It was just that she didn't like that person. Shan Yisu bit her lip, and looked at Emo Lian's departing figure, with a complicated expression. She didn't say anything for a long time. Young miss, why do we have to rush to see other people's cold faces? The little girl Mei Lan said angrily. The 3 states are so big. Who isn't obedient and respectful to young miss? There's no need to suffer this. Putting aside His Highness the Crown Prince who was obsessed with alchemists in Zhangzhou, who dared to treat alchemists like this in the surrounding small countries and tribes. Not all of them were alchemists and alchemists, rushing to befriend their young miss. As long as Miss casually took out a spirit-breaking pill, those who would rush to do her bidding could line up from Dragon Flame City to the Sea of Forgetfulness. This Crown Prince of the Divine Land was really insensible. Shan Yisu's eyes flashed faintly. Ever since she was young, her personality had always been like this. She would never do anything that was not for the best. The path to becoming an alchemist was like this, and the pursuit of a lifetime of happiness was also like this. With her status, she could find any man she wanted. But if she didn't like it personally, she naturally wouldn't want it. Speaking of which, she had only heard of the Crown Prince of the Divine Land in the beginning. Who would have thought that he would helplessly fall into her trap the first time they met? The Crown Prince of Shenzhou was superior in both appearance and ability. Compared to others, the one from Zhangzhou was no different from the mud under one's shoe. Shan Yisu was a very persistent person. Since she was young, as long as she set her mind on something, she would definitely do it. It was the same for the person he had chosen. If she set her mind on it, it would be hers. No matter how many hardships there would be in the future, she believed that she would achieve her wish one day. With this kind of confidence, Shan Yisu returned to his tent. After the discussion, everyone decided to go to bed early. After all, there was still a good battle to fight tomorrow. Chapter 3563. The next morning, when the sky was just beginning to brighten, the army had already set out early in the morning. Back then, Emo Lian and the others had found a small opening and charged into the village from the place with the fewest zombies. After investigating, they found that the periphery was completely blocked off by zombies. They still needed to expend a bit of effort to break out from the inside. Emo Lian and Fu Sambing split into 2 groups, each leading half of the army. Using firearms to clear the way, they charged out of the zombie nest like 2 sharp blades. Shan Yisu wanted to rush to Emo Lian's side several times, but she was always obstructed. She couldn't help but feel a bit stifled. Shan Yisu's cultivation wasn't high, and she could only be considered an ordinary person on the Divine Province. At the age of 28, she was currently at the 4th level of the spiritual realm, and her fire spirit had only reached the 5th level of the spiritual fire. Of course, although Shan Yisu's cultivation was low, no one would look down on her because of this. After all, she was a pill master, and most of her time was spent on the path of Pill Dao. Your Highness! Guifeng leaped to Emo Lian's side and whispered to her. There seems to be something strange about this Shan Yisu. And Lu glanced back and nodded. That's right, Your Highness. Look, there are so many zombies around her, but not a single one of them attacked her. Emo Lian, however, looked as if she was used to this. What do you think she relied on to escape from the zombie nest before? Of course it's the pills on her. Emo Lian said aloofly. She probably concocted a type of medicine that can temporarily conceal all of her aura. The zombies couldn't sense her, so they naturally wouldn't attack her. Guifeng nodded pensively. Then this Shan Yisu is someone with some ability. She's a god-rank pill master. Emolienne swept an indifferent glance over. Of course she has some ability. As they spoke, they had already led the soldiers to clear a path through the zombie horde and charged out of the sand wall. This place was surrounded by sand, and when they fought, sand and dust would roll endlessly. Fortunately, they had wrapped their noses and mouths with pieces of cloth in advance. Fighting against the corpse puppets in the sandstorm, the group moved quickly and nimbly. Wherever the soldiers swung their swords, the heads of the corpse puppets rolled off. Team 1 take a break. Team 2 take over. The troops advanced and retreated in an orderly manner. 1,000 people replaced the previous soldiers and began a new round of killing. Just like that, the group quickly advanced forward. Emolienne suddenly paused the long sword in his hand and turned around to take a look. In the midst of a gust of wind, sand spread out endlessly, like a roaring giant beast, swallowing everyone in an instant. The sudden gust of wind messed up the team, but soon, everyone adjusted their pace and tried their best to coordinate with each other. These elite troops were obviously veterans of the battlefield. It was also very easy to deal with the corpse puppets. Emolienne narrowed her eyes. Previously, he had also considered whether to use the large catapults to deal with these densely packed zombies. But this idea was ultimately rejected by him and Third Fu. For one, the large catapults were very cumbersome. Although they could knock down quite a few zombies with one strike of the hammer, they were still very useful. But everyone knew that merely injuring the limbs of the zombies wasn't of much use. Chapter 3564. In a battle of manpower, they could naturally dispose of these ugly fellows quickly, ruthlessly, and accurately. Team 2 rest. Team 3 take over. Following Huifeng's words, the teams moved again. They rapidly advanced toward the periphery. 2 hours later, they opened a gap in the zombie nest and encountered Fu San, who was leading his troops from the side. The two teams became increasingly invincible when they worked together. If one were to observe from above, they would discover that these two teams were in the shape of a scissor, like two sharp long swords that stabbed into the center of the zombie nest. Emolienne suddenly soared into the air. Facing the fierce sandstorm, she flew directly above the place where the numerous zombies were gathered. He coldly glanced at the group of zombies below. With a flick of his sleeve, countless pitch-black flames silently burned among the group of corpses. Every zombie that came into contact with the black flames roared and rolled on the ground. As a result, the speed at which the black flames spread and infected the zombies became even faster. The soldiers, who were already in low spirits, felt their spirits lift slightly when they saw this. The zombies before them blotted out the sky and covered the earth. They had already killed until their hands were sore. But now that they saw their prince's incomparable bravery, their confidence instantly multiplied. The teams took turns to replace each other, and the elite soldiers with high cultivation were arranged to be in the later teams. When it was their turn, the field was filled with alternating red and blue colors. Brilliant red fire spirits danced in everyone's hands, occasionally stabbing into the zombie horde with icicles. Seeing that the situation was basically under control, Emolienne handed a storage talisman containing the elderly, the weak, women and children to Fu San, and had him lead a portion of the physically exhausted people to retreat first. Your Highness, you must be careful. There are several high-level zombies in the zombie horde, and they've already scratched and injured many people. Fu San exhorted before leaving with his men. Emolienne glanced at Wang Dongping, who was currently helping the injured with a group of physicians. However, she saw that his face already revealed extreme exhaustion. It appeared that he had expended too much of his medicinal effects. Send the injured and the physicians out first. Emolienne turned to glance at Huifeng before instructing. Send someone to watch Wang Dongping and his sister. Yes. Huifeng immediately led people to move the wounded. Emolienne watched as more than half of the zombies were eliminated. Suddenly, she released more than 100 mechanical puppets. Retreat. After 6 hours of fighting, the soldiers were all exhausted. They needed to replenish their energy in a timely manner. There were less than 3,000 corpse puppets left, so they were not a threat at all. After they rested for a while, it was not impossible for them to come back and finish the work. After the bugle horn sounded, All the soldiers retreated in an orderly manner like a tide. One team after another, they headed out of the desert. After retreating more than 10 miles away from Greyfield Village, the sandstorm gradually subsided. Just as everyone was heaving a sigh of relief, more than a dozen earth tornadoes suddenly appeared in the sky and chased after the troops. Everyone was dumbfounded when they saw this. "Your Highness, retreat." Emolian waved her hand coldly. He could tell that they might have fallen into an earth spiritual formation. An expert must have set up a talisman formation here. That was probably the reason why the village was buried by the sand in an instant. However, it was already too late for him to realize this. Someone had already activated the Earth Spiritual Formation's second attack. Chapter 3565. More than a dozen earth tornadoes chased after them, and were already right in front of them, about to engulf everyone. Emolian's eyes flickered, and she swiftly flung out a mirror from her sleeve. That mirror expanded with the wind and rapidly grew. It instantly blotted out the sky and blocked out the sun in front of everyone. Bam! An earth tornado pounced forward, blocking the mirror outside. Everyone's eyes widened in shock as they stared at the mirror above their heads. Could this be a defensive divine weapon? While everyone was pondering this, they saw the earth tornado pounce toward the mirror again. Boom! 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 3 to 6 earth tornadoes rammed into the mirror. Emolian turned to instruct the dazed Huifeng. "Everyone retreat. Retreat 50 kilometers away first." Huifeng quickly nodded and ordered his subordinates to lead the soldiers away. He and the 100-odd purple forest guards all stayed behind and stood next to His Highness the Crown Prince. "Why aren't you leaving yet?" Emolian frowned and turned to glare at Huifeng. "Don't you know our capabilities? Hurry and scram with them. Don't make our eyes irritated." Emolian irritably roared at Huifeng. Huifeng and the youths of the Purple Forest Guard shook their heads in unison. What a joke. They definitely wouldn't leave. If His Highness was here, then they were here. If His Highness wasn't here, then there was no need for them to exist. Emolian glanced at Huifeng and the others in displeasure. But she didn't have time to be long-winded with them. She flicked her sleeve again, and several similar mirrors darted out from her sleeve and flew straight into the sky. At the same time, the first mirror abruptly shattered. While everyone was still in a daze, the second, third, and fourth mirrors flew to the same position and blocked the earth tornado's path. That earth tornado was probably a bit stuffy from being blocked the entire time, so it frantically spun wave after wave and pounced on the mirrors. Once, twice, thrice, and countless times, it shattered no less than 5 mirrors before finally crashing into Emolian's defensive barrier. Huifeng led a group of Purple Forest Guards to lend a helping hand, helping Crown Prince Emo erect a defensive boundary together, and reducing the pressure on him. At the same time, a middle-aged man in gray robes, who was sitting in the center of the sandstorm, opened his eyes and revealed 2 large yellow teeth. He coldly said, "Brat, I'll end your life here today. You dared to ruin our plans time and time again. This time, you'll definitely die in this sandstorm." He had set up this earth formation with great difficulty. Originally, it was only to raise the zombies underground as a defensive formation. However, as the experiments continued, more than half of the corpse puppets were destroyed by the heavenly Tao during an earthquake. Thus, he shifted his attention to the nearby villages. With so many ready-made corpse puppets that he could cultivate, why wouldn't he do it? New grudges and old grudges, I'll properly settle them with you, brat. A shrewd glint appeared in the middle-aged man's eyes. He suddenly clapped his hands together, and a jade talisman jumped out of his fingertips. As the jade talisman fused with the formation plate beneath his feet, the earth tornadoes that were originally howling outside the defensive barrier gathered together like a gathering of demons and ghosts. One after another, the earth tornadoes suddenly formed an enormous upside-down funnel-shaped tornado. It was at least 100 times larger than the previous earth tornado. Chapter 3566. This enormous tornado violently swept towards the Purple Forest Guards with earth-shaking power. Boom! The Purple Forest Guards who bore the brunt of the attack immediately spat out mouthfuls of blood as their bodies flew outwards. There had only been a thin layer of sand beneath their feet, But now, with the pervasive sandstorm, it grew thicker and thicker. The barren sand had already spread to their calves and was spreading towards their knees. Boom! The tornado crashed into the group's defensive boundary again. And this time, even more purple forest guards were sent flying. Under the impact of the power of heaven and earth, no one could confidently say that they would be able to withstand it. Emolien's eyes narrowed slightly. When the tornado crashed towards them again, she signaled with her eyes, and Huifeng and the others immediately understood. At the same time, they withdrew the defensive boundary with Emolien. The tornado arrived with a howl, filling the air with sandstorm and swallowing all of them in one gulp. From afar, it looked like an enormous skull had swallowed Emolien, Huifeng, and the others into its gaping maw. The gray-robed middle-aged man, who'd been meditating in the Earth Spirit formation, suddenly opened his eyes and laughed maniacally. Good. He'd finally taken care of this brat who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, and opposed their organization at every turn. If this brat knew that he'd died at Chu Qingfei's hands, who knew what he'd think? The gray-robed middle-aged man smiled smugly. Senior brother Black Cat, I've avenged you. At the same time, Emolien and the others, whose bodies seemed to have been bitten off by the skull's gaping maw, still didn't show themselves in the thick dust. Single-clothed Su's sleeve was pulled by the little girl beside him. At this time, he was looking at the scene in front of him with an ashen face. No way, His Highness the Crown Prince died just like that? Would the person she took a fancy to die so easily? Miss, let's hurry and leave. The tornado might still be digesting after swallowing them. If it digests any later, it might come for us. The girl Meilon glanced mysteriously at the tornado that was spinning in place and felt her entire body tremble. She couldn't have been right, could she? Just now, this tornado seemed to have looked at her very spiritually. Shani Su took a deep breath, nodded, and was about to leave. Suddenly, a few pitch-black leaves drilled out of the gale. What was that? Shani Su stopped and looked back with a puzzled expression. This time, she could see clearly, only to see a few roots suddenly springing out from under a few leaves. Immediately after, the roots grew like a towering tree. The longer it grew, the taller it grew, the tighter it became. A main branch, like a giant tree and a wide vine, suddenly drilled out of the cloud of sand, suddenly bursting all the sand around it. A giant ink-colored lotus flower that could seize the good fortune of heaven and earth appeared before the eyes of single-clothed Su and her maid. The two of them looked at everything in front of them in shock. Their little mouths were slightly agape, as if they didn't know what to say. Over 100 purple forest guards were hanging from the main branch of the black lotus, and they were all looking down with dumbfounded expressions. They were 100 meters above the ground. At this moment, they looked at each other in dismay, and then looked up. They saw His Highness standing in the middle of a half-open black lotus flower. His long hair was scattered in the wind, and his handsome face was expressionlessly looking at them. Chapter 3567. What did you see? For some reason, the purple forest guards all felt that His Highness's voice seemed to be suffused with a thick chill. They all shook their heads with a strong desire to live and said in unison, "This subordinate swears." This subordinate didn't see anything. Could they say that His Highness stood on a flower bud and was extraordinarily handsome, comparable to a flower? They obviously couldn't. If they wanted to live, they had to be smarter and learn how to keep their mouths shut. It would be best if they could be both blind and mute. Emolien glanced at them. With a flick of her sleeve, she swooped down from 100 meters in the air and landed firmly on her feet. When the purple forest guards saw this, they all jumped down in unison with His Highness. Huifeng chuckled mischievously. When he saw Prince Emo turn to look at him, he awkwardly rubbed his nose. In reality, he didn't want to laugh. He just subconsciously chuckled. Oh no, would His Highness think that he was laughing at him? Huifeng, didn't Your Majesty say in your last letter that our wife bought an estate on Mount Heaven Saint? Take some people with you to dig it up later. What? Huifeng wanted to cry but had no tears. He glanced at His Highness. Just how much of a person did this lord like to seek revenge for the smallest grievance? Your Highness, this subordinate swears that I definitely wasn't laughing at your beauty earlier. After Huifeng finished speaking, he suddenly discovered that the air had quieted down. He stiffly turned his head and saw that the purple forest guards were all looking at him like he was a corpse. He instantly wanted to cry but had no tears. 3 months. Emolian tossed down this icily before ignoring our dear Huifeng with a bitter expression. With a wave of his hand, the enormous ink-colored lotus flower that pierced the sky and earth slowly shrunk until it was the size of a small flower and directly disappeared between his brows. Emolian turned to look ahead and summoned 7th Yen with an icy gaze. Her finger moved slightly forward. Over there. 7th Yen whistled, and the golden dragon swept Emolian up with a sweep of its tail. The human and dragon traveled against the wind, and it was as if countless raging wind ghosts were brushing past them. However, to them, it didn't affect them at all. Emolian waved her hand, and a sword appeared in her hand. A thick sword intent instantly flew out from the sword, creating a buzzing sound as it rubbed against the violent wind. Like a primordial force that tore apart the heavens and earth, this perfectly straight sword intent slashed towards the center of the zombie horde, with an invisible force that could destroy heaven and earth. The sound of a sudden explosion rang out among the group of corpse puppets. Chu Qingfei, who was sitting in the middle of the Earth Spirit formation, was shocked. He couldn't escape in time, and was hit on the back by a sword intent. His physical body instantly disintegrated, while his soul attached itself to a blood-stained jade talisman and suddenly burrowed into the ground with a squeak. Emolian seemed to sense something and looked down. However, at this moment, the thick dust was billowing, making it impossible to clearly see what was inside the destroyed Earth spiritual array disk in the center of the zombie horde. However, Yin Qi sensed something very keenly. Master, the array disk has been broken, but the person in the array disk has escaped. His body has died and his soul has escaped. Emolian nodded with an indifferent expression. Suddenly, as if he had sensed something, he looked down. Sand and pebbles flew up under her feet, and all the earth and stones seemed to be sucked into the broken array disk, accompanied by waves of roaring corpse puppets. The earth trembled. The Earth spiritual array disk began to disintegrate, sucking in everything nearby. Chapter 3568. Emolian's expression changed. He was currently standing above the damaged formation disk, so he was naturally at the center of this sandstorm. Hence, he promptly recalled 7th Yen, but he was already uncontrollably sucked into the center of the formation disk. Huifeng and the others naturally turned pale with fright. However, they were still quite a distance away from the center of the formation disk, so by the time they rushed over, they saw that His Highness the Crown Prince had already disappeared from the center of the broken formation disk. Even the corpse puppets in the vicinity were all swept away. Your Highness! Everyone's expressions changed drastically. Mai Qiao's section break. When Arbor finished drawing the last batch of jade talismans on Fish Orchid Planet, she discovered that it was already close to noon. Kai Xiu pushed open the door and entered before bowing to her. The carriage is ready. Crown Princess, shall we set off now? Arbor nodded, a cold smile flitting across her lips. How is the page boy outside? Kai Chi, who had followed her in, covered her mouth and giggled. He's about to peel off a layer of skin from the sun. He's showing signs of getting heat stroke, so someone helped him to the side to rest. How loyal and devoted. Arbor shook her head expressionlessly and got up to walk out the door. She had already explained the situation to her parents yesterday, so she didn't go to bid farewell today. In any case, she didn't need to stay in the Mu residence for long. She would leave after getting what she deserved from Morning Sun Pavilion. Now, she was increasingly hostile toward the Mu family, and she didn't have any favorable impression of them at all. She kept feeling that everyone in the Mu family, from top to bottom, was adept at scheming and wore a mask to conduct themselves. Just like that seemingly benevolent old lady. How could she abandon a granddaughter she had been with for so many years just like that? Arbor got into the carriage and sat there by herself, shaking her head slightly, as if she had thought of something. The carriage drove out of Changle Avenue and headed toward Winter Moon Mountain Forest in the west. People came and went along the way, and the streets and alleys were filled with the cries of peddlers. Arbor had spent 6 days and 6 nights drawing talismans on Fish Orchid Planet. He He had basically finished drawing all the blank talismans that he could draw in the end. She seemed to have arrived at the great vacuum realm. In the end, she seemed to have gathered the power of heaven and earth and drawn a saint-grade golden talisman with the help of the gods. This was a saint-grade golden talisman summoning talisman. This was the first time she had successfully drawn a saint-grade golden talisman in her entire life. At that time, she had decisively put away the sacred grade golden talisman and stepped out of the fish orchid planet. As expected, she had attracted a bolt of lightning, and it was still a small lightning strike. The lightning flashed and the thunder rumbled. It looked ferocious and lasted for a long time in the sky. However, when it came down to strike her, it seemed to be very weak. Speaking of which, she seemed to have gone crazy yesterday. She had drawn so many talismans and only rested for less than 4 hours. Now she seemed to be a little drowsy. Xiaomu simply took a thin blanket and lay down to sleep for a while. When the carriage stopped in front of the Mu family's house, they suddenly heard a clang. An arrow with the word Lin carved on the tail of the arrow happened to be stuck in the window of Arbor's carriage. The tail of the arrow trembled slightly. This sound naturally woke up the little crown princess who was sleeping soundly. She raised her head, and her eyes instantly became clear. A pair of fierce eyes suddenly shot out through the curtain of the window. Who dares to disturb the crown princess? Kaishio scolded and jumped out of the carriage. Chapter 3569. In front of the Mu family's spacious mountain gate, more than a dozen people in tattered clothes ran out, as if they were fleeing. Their expressions were panicked, and their eyes were filled with terror. Each and every one of them ran for their lives, and some even bumped into carriages and fell to the ground. Their heads and faces were covered in blood from the fall, but they couldn't care too much as they got up and continued running. Screams of alarm could be heard everywhere. Arbor came out of the carriage, her eyes slightly narrowed as she looked at the chaotic scene in front of her. Kaishio hastily grabbed a weary older sister and asked in bewilderment, "This older sister, what happened?" That older sister hastily flung Kaishio's hand away and continued running forward crookedly. Several arrows suddenly shot out from behind her, flying towards the crowd of people. Arbor's expression turned grave, and she threw out several golden needles with a flick of her hand. After several ding-ding-ding sounds, those pursuing arrows were all struck down to the ground by the golden needles. "Big Sister Muir, not a single one of your 3 arrows hit their mark." Laughter was heard, and it was soon followed by the voices of many young people jeering together. "Prince Linchuan's vassal prince's arrow is extremely domineering. Tisk, but didn't it still miss?" Playful laughter followed. A group of men and women, about a dozen of them, followed the laughter and chatter as they walked over. Xiaomu naturally recognized the youth leading that group of youths. It was the second branch's proud son of heaven, Mu Erkshu. 7th Miss Mu Ruyan was standing beside Mu Erkshu. Upon seeing Arbor standing in front of the carriage, Mu Ruyan immediately pursed her lips and tugged at her older brother Mu Erkshu's sleeve, muttering something softly. Mu Erkshu looked towards Arbor and nodded politely. He walked over first and cupped his hands, saying, "We didn't know that the crown princess would suddenly grace us with her presence. We were playing archery just now and accidentally startled the crown princess. May the crown princess forgive us." Arbor's gaze swept over, and she couldn't help but frown. Apart from some Mu family descendants, there were also many other patrician families' descendants among the young men and women present. For example, the Qin family's 5th Qin and 9th Qin young master were standing not far behind. There was also a young man, who was called the Crown Prince of Linchuan. He was also looking at her curiously. Lord Linchuan had lived in his fief for a long time. Arbor had heard about his son's return to the capital 2 days ago, but he didn't have the patience to deal with it. Now that she suddenly saw the heir of the Prince of Linchuan, Xiaomu also curiously sized him up a few times. This young lad was quite good-looking. He had inherited the Emo family's tradition and was quite handsome, unlike that brat Emo Kuan, who had a hideous appearance. This person was pleasing to the eye, but the arrogance between his brows imperceptibly seeped out, causing Xiaomu to shift her gaze away after sweeping a glance at him. While they were talking, the beggars in tattered clothes who were running around were yelled at by more than a dozen family guards and escorted back. Every one of them had some injuries on their bodies and faces. They looked at the Linchuan Crown Prince's group in horror, as if they were looking at demons. "What is this for?" Arbor asked calmly with a trace of cold indifference in her eyes. "These are merely a bunch of beggars living on the streets. We invited them over to eat and drink, so they naturally have to make us happy. Isn't this very fair?" Chapter 3570. The one who spoke was a young lady from an aristocratic family. Her voice was incomparably arrogant, her eyes slanted upwards, and her nose wrinkled from time to time as she spoke. It was as if the lives of these beggars were as lowly as dog poop on the roadside in her eyes. She could trample on them wantonly and play with them as she pleased. "Who are you?" Arbor asked coldly. Mu Erkshu was an intelligent person. Even though he hadn't interacted much with the young Crown Prince Consort, he already knew the young Crown Prince Consort's temperament after a few short interactions and understanding of her. Looking at her expressionless face, she looked calm on the surface, but her heart was most likely surging with anger. Mu Erkshu hurriedly tried to smooth things over. "Crown Princess, please calm down. This is the young lady of the Lin family of Rong City. The Lin family is proficient in the study of arrays, and is one of the top aristocratic families in Rong City." Arbor glanced at Mu Erkshu coldly. This glance made Mu Erkshu inexplicably unable to continue speaking. Lin Miao knitted her delicate brows and said with an indifferent expression, "These people should know that if they want to get anything, they have to pay a price, don't they?" "Kaixio," the little crown princess said coldly. Kaixio immediately responded and walked forward. When she arrived in front of Lin Miao, she slapped her fair face without saying a word. Following the crisp sound of the slap, everyone could not help but be stunned. Kaixio said with a calm face, "You have no manners. If you want to talk to the crown princess, you have to kneel down first." Lin Miao was so angry that her whole body trembled. A trace of anger suddenly appeared in her beautiful eyes, and she raised her hand to slap Kaixio's face. As a daughter of the Lin family, she had never suffered such humiliation in her life. When she lived in Rong City in the past, everyone in Rong City, including the city lord, was respectful to the Lin family and did everything they could to curry favor with them. It had only been 2 or 3 months since she moved to Longyan City, but she did not expect to suffer such humiliation. How could Lin Miao endure this anger in her heart? However, before her little hand could touch Kaixio's cheek, her wrist was struck by a golden needle. Lin Miao's fingers went numb, and her entire arm fell limply to her side. A trace of fear appeared in her eyes. "Sister Miaoer." A familiar voice made Arbor look over. She saw Luiran holding Lin Miaoer's arm with a pained expression. Seeing this motley crew, Arbor felt annoyed for no reason. He said coldly, "Tie them up." 2 purple forest guards darted out from behind her with a whoosh. They grabbed Lin Miaoer's arms from both sides and pushed her in front of the young crown prince consort. Mu Erksha hurriedly came out to smooth things over. "Crown princess, I'm afraid this isn't very appropriate." In any case, she was the eldest young miss of the Lin family in Fuzhou City. If she was bullied in the Mu family's territory, who knew how the Lin family would come looking for trouble with the Mu family? Mu Ruian couldn't help but cry out, "Crown princess, what are you doing? Don't you like to play archery games? Then I, the crown princess, will play with you." Arbor's cold gaze swept over everyone present, and she waved her small hand slightly. The purple forest guard immediately understood. He released Lin Miaoer's arm and pushed her forward heavily, berating, "Why aren't you running?" At this moment, an exquisite purple bow had appeared in the young crown prince consort's hand. As spirit energy seeped into it, the small bow in her hand grew in the wind, and with a whoosh, it became the size of a normal bow. Chapter 3571. The arrowhead was aimed at Lin Miaoer's pale face. Everyone was taken aback and looked at Arbor with an incredulous expression. The crown princess was actually aiming her bow at Miss Lin? Seeing that Lin Miaoer didn't react, Arbor released the arrow, and like a gust of wind chasing the moon, it directly shot towards Lin Miaoer's heart. "Sister Miaoer." Luiran covered her mouth and screamed. This scream made Lin Miaoer recover from the shock, and hurriedly dodged to the side. But as soon as she moved, she found that her cultivation seemed to be suppressed. Her movements were slower than usual, and the arrow brushed past her shoulder and nailed to the trunk behind her. The tree trunk swayed slightly, and suddenly the entire tree fell backwards, crashing to the ground with a loud crash. It was obvious that the little crown princess arrow was not just for show, but really wanted to take her life. "You!" Lin Miaoer was anxious and angry, her face flushed red. She covered her soft and bleeding arm with one hand, and hurriedly turned around, and ran out of the Mu family's mountain gate. This crown princess was simply a lunatic. A wise man knows when to retreat. At this time, she ran home first and let her father come and reason with the Mu family. "Running so slow you really want to die," Arbor coldly shouted, and the second arrow followed the clouds and moon, shooting towards Lin Miaoer's back. Lin Miaoer glanced back, and when she saw the arrow coming straight at her, her whole person was frightened. She quickly twisted the defensive ring on her hand. The second arrow was blocked by the defensive shield, and with the force of the arrow hitting her back, she fell forward a few meters away, a trace of blood oozing out of her mouth. She was serious. Was the crown prince consort crazy? She really wanted to kill her, Lin Miaoer, with an arrow. Lin Miaoer ran a few more steps forward, and her whole person almost stumbled to the ground. However, at this moment, the third arrow had already caught up, shooting straight over her head and shooting down a big tree in front of her. Lin Muir watched the big tree crash to the ground, blocking her way, and her whole little face was almost pale. As soon as she turned around, she was horrified to find that the little crown princess' fourth and fifth arrows had already caught up to her. The fifth arrow chased after the tail of the fourth arrow, directly splitting the fourth arrow in half, passing through and shooting straight between her eyebrows. Crown Princess! Crown Princess! Mu Erkshu, Linchuan Wang Shitzi, and the others all cried out in surprise. Wouldn't this arrow between Lin Muir's life? Lin Muir's legs went soft and she fell to the ground. She opened her mouth and cried. She had really lost all her face today. The little Lin Muir, and the whole arrow. The whole arrow, the whole arrow. Lin Muir's the crown princess and leaning against the tree Mionbai, to, and of she was. Crown Princess! You're too much, aren't you? Mu Ruian cried out in exasperation. You're too much of a bully. Louis Ran hurriedly rushed over, reaching out to help Lin Muir, who was hugging her knees and crying bitterly up. She also shouted, Crown Princess, what are you doing? How can you bully people like this? So what if I bully you? The little Crown Princess walked over to them with an indifferent expression. Chapter 3572. In your eyes, these beggars are nothing more than the mud beneath your feet, ants that you can bully at will. But in my eyes, you are nothing but ants. I'm just an ant. I can do whatever I want, isn't that so? The young Crown Prince Consort clapped her small hands twice. Someone come and round them up. Today, this Crown Princess will also learn from their horse-riding game and shoot beggars. I'll have a good time with them. Yes, the purple forest guards mounted their horses. As the hooves of the horses trampled on the ground, dust flew everywhere. The soldiers urged their horses to encircle the outer circle, blocking the crowd of panicking noble ladies and noble sons at the foot of the Mu family's mountain gate. Everyone couldn't help but gasp in shock. Mu Erkshu cried out, Crown Princess, you're too. Arbor tossed about to Prince Linchuan's heir. Prince Linchuan, are you interested in dueling with this Crown Princess? Prince Linchuan's face was completely stupefied. Before this lord came to the capital, he had been warned not to ever confront the little fiend Crown Prince Consort. Otherwise, you'll definitely not be able to bear the consequences. He didn't expect to meet her for the first time in less than 2 days after arriving in the capital. Under such circumstances, he really didn't want to offend the Crown Princess. Now that the young Crown Princess had issued an invitation, how could he possibly dare to accept? Shaking his head repeatedly, Prince Linchuan hastily said, Sister-in-law, sister-in-law. No, this younger brother naturally wouldn't dare to fight with sister-in-law. If this little brother has done anything inappropriate, I hope that sister-in-law will forgive this little brother on account of this little brother's youth and ignorance. The young Crown Princess coldly swept a glance at him and pointed a finger at him. I will tell His Majesty everything that happened today. Just you wait. You've completely disgraced the Missouri estate today. If I were your father, I would personally deal with you and give you a good beating. That way, you won't always be with a bunch of wastrels and go astray in the future. Student Mosu almost burst into tears. He didn't know how the purple forest guards had brought him out. Following that, all the noble ladies and nobles on the field panicked as they ran around frantically in the Crown Prince Consort's archery game. Qin Jiu was also on the verge of crying, and he dragged his fifth brother to run towards the edge while repeatedly calling out, Crown Prince Consort, Crown Prince Consort. Fifth brother, and I didn't do anything just now. We didn't shoot those beggars. Crown Princess. Sob Qin Jiu felt that he really had 8 lifetimes of bad luck. Today, he was only invited by Mu Erkshu to drink, but in the middle of drinking, Lin Muir suddenly suggested playing some archery game. Fifth brother didn't know martial arts, so he had been standing next to fifth brother to protect him, lest a stray arrow hit his fifth brother. He didn't expect to be treated as an accomplice by the Crown Princess now and be forced to leave the stage together with her. Sob. He was Duan Yu's good friend. Weren't the young Crown Princess and Duan Yu good friends? He thought that based on this relationship, he and the young Crown Princess could be considered good friends. Fifth young Master Qin was also looking at the little lady with a complicated expression. She was so ruthless, and those arrows she shot were indeed aiming to take someone's life. If it weren't for the fact that these young masters and misses didn't have a few life-saving spirit weapons on them, they would probably be strewn with corpses by now. Chapter 3573. Fifth young Master Qin felt that he truly couldn't understand the young lady before him. If you say that she loves money, she can return all the gifts she sent back without saying a word. Say that she was heartless and callous, but she could stand up for beggars and teach these patrician families' young masters and young misses a lesson. He truly couldn't understand this young lady, not at all. He was about to be confused by himself. Approximately 15 minutes later, Mu Jingfeng rushed over upon hearing the news and hastily stopped them. At this time, the young men and women on the field were more or less injured. Some were bruised and swollen from the fall. Some had arrows pierced through their arms or buttocks, and some had broken legs and arms. At this moment, they were all clutching their wounds and groaning pitifully. "Crown Princess, what are you doing?" Mu Jingfeng couldn't resist bellowing angrily. For such a thing to happen at his Mu family's doorstep, it wouldn't be something to be proud of, no matter what if word got out. Arbor coldly glared at him and directly put away the bow in his hand. He waved his hand and said, "You came at the right time. Lead the way to Morning Sun Pavilion." Her goal for this trip was Morning Sun Pavilion, so why would she waste her breath on them? Mu Jingfeng practically flew into a rage on the spot when he saw her contemptuous attitude and simply didn't place him, her father, in her eyes. Although you're the crown princess and have a noble status, don't forget that you're also the Mu family's daughter. Shut up, Arbor promptly bellowed without giving face. That icy expression caused Mu Jingfeng's entire body to tense up. This daughter truly wasn't of one mind with their Mu family. "Weren't you the one who wrote a letter for me to come to Morning Sun Pavilion? Why are you spouting so much nonsense now that I'm here?" "Arbor, don't go overboard. How has the family wronged you? For your sake, we've already dealt with Mu Rochuan. Dealing with Mu Rochuan is your Mu family's matter. What does it have to do with me?" Arbor coldly interrupted Mu Jingfeng's words. With a stern expression, she impatiently said, "Don't put the life and death of some cat or dog on this crown princess' head. Don't think that I'll be grateful to the Mu family just because I'll punish Mu Rochuan when I come back. On the contrary, this will only show me your selfish, hypocritical, disgusting, and heartless face." Mu Jingfeng was so infuriated by the little fella's scolding that his entire body trembled uncontrollably. He stammered "you" for a long time, but was unable to utter a single word. As the daughter of your Mu family, once you no longer have any value, you will be mercilessly abandoned. Arbor looked at the man in front of him indifferently, his eyes full of disdain. Mother must have been blind to choose a man like you. In his fury, Mu Jingfeng threw a slap at Arbor's face. How could Xiaomu be struck by his slap? With a twist of her body, her small fist directly bombarded Mu Jingfeng's face in a fit of rage. Bang! Mu Jingfeng crossed his fists in front of his eyes and blocked Arbor's fist. The father-daughter pair stood firm and did not move an inch. While the father-daughter pair was cursing at each other until they made a move, the hundreds of people in front of the Mu family's mountain gate all fell silent. Even though there were many onlookers, no one dared to make a sound. "Do you think I'm my mother who will resign herself to adversity?" Arbor bellowed furiously. Chapter 3574. If you dare to lay a hand on me, I'll let you drown in a pond and dismember your corpse. You'll die without a burial ground. Everyone was dumbstruck. Mu Jingfeng sucked in a breath of cold air and roared, "Unfilial daughter!" At this moment, the Mu family's mountain gate was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Even Mu Ruian and the rest were completely stupefied. They never thought that there would really be a girl in this world who dared to lay a hand on her father. In everyone's eyes, the little crown princess in front of them was simply insane. "Who admitted that you're mine?" Arbor coldly looked at Mu Jingfeng, who was panting from his anger, and swept him a disdainful glance. Want to be my father? Not just any random cat or dog on the street has that qualification. I'm only here to get my prize today. I'll leave once I'm done. Don't talk nonsense and lead the way. Right now, she no longer had any favorable impression of the Mu family, especially after they dealt with Mu Rochuan and schemed to take credit for it in front of her. She had lost the last trace of warmth toward the Mu family. Mu Qingya, who heard the news, hastily ran out and ran to the red-eyed Mu Jingfeng. She hastily said, "Lord, let's talk things out. The crown princess is still young and impulsive. Could it be that Lord can be as impulsive as her?" Mu Jingfeng was truly about to explode from anger today. This daughter of his was truly a jinx. She came back this time just to get her prize, and didn't have the slightest bit of intimacy or reverence toward him, her father. How could he have such a heartless and unfeeling daughter? Was this really Long Qian's daughter? Long Qian appeared unyielding, but her temperament was the best. Normally, she wouldn't get into any disputes with others, but this daughter? She was simply a natural troublemaker. Arbor turned to look at the huddled beggars, and instructed the Purple Forest Guard. "Send these people down the mountain." "Sister-in-law, I'll send them off." Prince Linchuan's air had long turned pale from fright. He promptly volunteered to make up for his mistake. Arbor looked at him coldly. Emosu only felt that gaze was like the water of a cold pond, the depths of an icy spring, so cold that it made one's heart tremble uncontrollably. "I promise that he and the others will be fine." Fifth young Sir Qin left with Emosu with a complicated expression. Even now, he still couldn't understand the young crown princess. Call her cold and resolute. But she was so kind to some beggars whom she had never met before. You can say that she's kind, but she's so cold and murderous towards her own father. Although the crown princess was young, she was an exceptionally difficult person to read. Arbor turned around and walked towards the Mu clan's mountain gate. "Lead the way." "My lotus's section break." Dong 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 dong. Mo Lien knocked on the seeping mountain wall beside her. As she walked, she kept picking up the crystal cores on the ground. He along with him. A large number of corpse puppet cores were sucked into the ground by the formation plate. However, it was unknown where the corpses of the corpse puppets had gone, or if they were buried by the soil. In any case, it would be a waste not to pick them up. Mo Lien thus walked forward, picking up the large pile of crystal cores on the ground while she was at it. Previously, when they were fighting with the zombie horde, no one had time to pick up the crystal cores. Now the crown prince had benefited for nothing. Chapter 35. Stepping on the rippling rocks with a sound, the penetrating bone nail flew out from his fingertips. Prince Emo narrowed into the end of the long stone wall, and he raised his hand to fling out a concealed weapon. After a scream, who cared if she was a human or a ghost, also disappeared. He would nail her without a second word. Prince Emo casually threw out a golem, took out a black stick, and poked the golem's shoulder. "Go to, scout ahead." That golem called Tu was a bit dim-witted. When it heard Crown Prince Mo's command, it walked forward clumsily and staggered along the stone that was flowing with a trickle of water. Prince Mo followed behind Tu, took out a winter fruit from his inner world, and took a bite. Needless to say, after a day of torment, his stomach was empty. Even Mo Lien was feeling a little hungry. He casually ate 2 or 3 winter fruits to fill his stomach, and followed Golem Tu to the turn in the tunnel. This was a long underground tunnel. Other than the stone walls on both sides, there were only rugged stones under their feet. Underground water came out from the cracks of the stones, so when they walked, they were always dripping with water. Fortunately, the soles of his boots were quite thick, otherwise, they would have been soaked by the water. Prince Mo kept the crystal nuclei along the way, filling up more than half of the space in an empty purple storage talisman. In the future, there would be enough crystal nuclei to increase the efficacy of the medicine. He thought in his heart, and slowly came to a stop. That golem number 2 stood in front of him in a daze. Without Emolien's instructions, he didn't move, and just stood there foolishly like a wooden blockhead. Looking from where it stood, there were a few drops of fresh blood on the ground, which had not been completely soaked by the trickling water. The water on the stone wall formed a natural small water screen. There should be a small stone cave inside. The view was blocked by the water screen, and looking in, it was pitch black. Emolien did not plan to take the risk. but used the little black stick to poke the golem's waist. Go in and see who is there pretending to be ghosts. The golem strode over, and not long after, a woman's scream could be heard. Emolien frowned and took 2 steps back. Not long after, Golem 2 came out of the small cave with a woman with disheveled hair in its hand. Ah! Ah! The woman's cries suddenly stopped, and she changed into a pleasantly surprised tone. She shrieked, "Your Highness, Your Highness!" Emolien glanced at that woman with disheveled hair that concealed her true appearance. He simply didn't know who she was. However, Prince Emo recognized the bone-piercing nail on the woman's left shoulder. Brother Duan Yu's famous work was a bone-piercing nail that injured his tendons and bones for half a month. Oh, it turned out that the penetrating bone nail had hit this woman. Prince Emo did not feel guilty at all. He shouted at Mechanical Puppet 2, "Throw her away and let's go. Don't pick up all the trash from him." He still had to find his way back, so he didn't have time to talk nonsense with some random people. Your Highness! Your Highness!" However, the woman who was thrown to the ground by the golem suddenly crawled up and scrambled toward Emolien's feet. Before her claws could reach Emolien's legs, His Highness the Crown Prince abruptly kicked her in the chin. This was truly tragic. After a faint crack, the woman wailed and clutched her face in so much pain that she could barely speak. Chapter 3576. Prince Emo glanced at her angrily. She could only blame herself for throwing herself at his feet. She was simply crazy. He hated being touched by some strangers the most. She looked dirty and ugly, so how could she have the nerve to throw herself at him? Emolien harumphed. He didn't even spare that woman a glance out of the corner of his eye, as he walked around that small water screen and followed after her. The rocky road began to wind upwards, leading to an unknown place. This underground must have been hollowed out by the people of Tianyan to make a stronghold. The array above was most likely a protective array, used to prevent strangers from breaking in. Your Highness, I am Susu." Shan Isu covered her face and turned around, but she saw that there was no one behind her. His Highness the Crown Prince had already walked away with the wooden mechanical man. Shan Isu could not help but feel angry. She had traveled extensively and met so many people, but she had never seen someone like the Crown Prince of Shenzhou, who did not give her any face. Shan Isu could not help but feel angry and unwilling. She raised her hand and clenched her teeth, wanting to remove the bone nail from her shoulder. After she was sucked down by the array disc, her whole body fell on the pile of stones, and her whole body was in pain. Just as she was groaning in pain, a hidden weapon came flying out of nowhere and nailed her on the shoulder. She was shocked and scared, thinking that there was an enemy hiding in the dark, so she hurriedly dragged her body into the small stone cave behind the water curtain, intending to treat the various small wounds on her body. However, she did not expect that before she finished treating, she was pulled out of the small stone cave. She was really unlucky to have met such an unromantic man. She wanted to delicately seek protection and help, but her chin was almost broken by the man. She felt that there was no place on her body that did not hurt. She must first use medicine to treat the injuries on her body. Shan Isu took out 2 healing pills from her inner world and swallowed them. She also took out a medicinal herb, rubbed it in her hand, and then applied it to the small wounds on her body. These superficial wounds were easy to treat, but the bone nail on her shoulder was very difficult to remove. She had already tried to retrieve it for herself earlier, but unfortunately, she did not succeed. Firstly, her head was lowered, so it was difficult for her to move with one hand. Secondly, the penetrating bone nail was very strange. Once it was nailed into the skin, it was useless to forcefully pull it out. There were dark hooks hanging around the concealed weapon, which were sucked into the depths of the flesh. If he were to use force, he would only tear off an entire piece of flesh, making him suffer unspeakably. Shan Isu tried 2 more times, and could only give up temporarily. After all, it was not very convenient for her to treat his wound with her head lowered. However, if this concealed weapon was left in his skin, it would easily cause his skin to fester. At that time, if he wanted to take it out again, it would be extremely painful. His Highness the Crown Prince is so cruel. Shan Isu stamped her feet. After hastily treating her wound, She hurriedly ran after Emolien. After chasing for about half an hour, they finally caught up with Prince Emo, who had stopped at the end of the road. "Your Highness." Shani Su's expression did not change, but her heart was slightly happy. A man and a woman alone in a room. How could she cultivate some feelings with His Highness? Shani Su was about to reach out to touch his back, but she saw Prince Emo, who was originally standing in front of her. Chapter 3578. A strong human-headed lion beast, a mighty steel rhinoceros skin man, and a human-headed eagle beast with a slender neck. Previously, in the underground base of Xingfu Village near Yunxia Peak, he had seen the same carving. Xingfu Village, Huiping Village, the same carving, the same organization. Tianyan had scattered many strongholds on the divine land. At this moment, he was probably planning to activate those strongholds one by one. Emolien raised his hand and punched a diamond-shaped stone platform on the left. With a rumbling sound, the two thick stone doors that were closely connected to the stone walls slowly opened inwards. When Emolien was about to walk inside, he heard a loud sound behind him. He turned his head and narrowed his cold phoenix eyes. A trace of mockery flashed across his lips. Time turned back to a few minutes ago. Shani Su chased Prince Emo all the way to the place where Prince Emo had escaped the attack of a row of stone pillars. When Shani Su saw the stone pillars on the ground, she knew that the Crown Prince must have triggered the mechanism when he passed by. Since the mechanism had been triggered, she didn't need to worry about being attacked. So she didn't pay attention to her feet. When she hurried forward, she stepped on a hard stone. At that time, she heard the rumbling sound of a spring above her head. Shani Su knew that something bad was going to happen. Just as he was about to leave, another row of rocks came tumbling down from above his head. Suddenly, the beautiful alchemist Dan was smashed into a pile of rocks, instantly burying her. With her cultivation, she didn't suffer any external injuries, but the shock was certainly not small. When she got out of the pile of stones with a dusty face, it was already half an hour later. At this time, Shani Su's face was bruised and swollen. She couldn't see anyone. She quickly looked at herself in the mirror and screamed. She dressed up, applied medicine and changed her clothes. After a long time, she chased in the direction of the Crown Prince. But at this time, the Crown Prince had already entered the main room of the Tianyan lair. In the main room, she could still see the bottles and jars used for the previous experiments, and the big jar tiles were all placed there. But now it was naturally empty. Prince Emo walked around the main hall of the stone room, but didn't find anything out of the ordinary, so he walked towards the side room. This side room had long been cleaned up, and there was nothing left in the room. Emolien circled around the stone rooms, and when he carelessly touched the stone wall, he heard the sound of a spring. A small stone door opened on the stone wall beside him. Just as the Crown Prince entered the stone door, Shani Su's exasperated cry came from behind him. "Your Highness, I am Susu. I'm Susu." Emolien turned a deaf ear to her. He couldn't be bothered to care who that woman was. At this moment, when he heard the single-robed Su introduce himself, he couldn't help but curl his lips. Turning around, he entered the small stone door. He raised his hand and tapped on the mechanism beside him. The stone door slowly slid down. "Your Highness." Shani Su was anxious, angry, and unable to calm down. She didn't expect that the Crown Prince didn't even bother to say a word to her. After entering the stone door, he even sealed her escape route and directly closed the door. He just didn't want to go with her. What kind of person was this? At least the two of them could discuss and go out together. Wasn't that better? This Crown Prince of the Divine Land was simply sick. Chapter 3579. Shani Su chased after him, flustered and exasperated. Without thinking, she threw out a handful of medicinal powder, which floated straight into the stone door. Prince Emo couldn't help but fly into a rage. She had already attacked him. Although he didn't know what medicinal powder this woman threw out, it clearly wasn't anything good. Thus, Emolien raised his hand, and a bundle of surging black flames rushed out of the stone door. When the stone door fell heavily to the ground, he only heard Shani Su's scream, following which, that voice was completely covered by the stone door that fell down. This damn woman really got off easy. Emolian couldn't quell his resentment. He retreated several steps before looking down to check his body. Fortunately, he had always been cautious. When he saw this woman chasing after him, he immediately activated his defensive spiritual weapon. With the defensive barrier blocking him outside, no matter what kind of poisonous powder that woman threw at him, it was useless against him. Emolian turned around and walked up the passageway. However, he abruptly turned back, and his phoenix eyes hardened as he threw out 2 balls of black flames. With 2 sudden bangs, 2 small snakes were blasted into pieces by his black flames above the stone wall, and their mangled flesh flowed down. Emolian's gaze landed on the black blood flowing down the stone wall, and the murderous intent in his eyes rippled faintly. You really are alive. Sick. Sick. Mu residents in Dragon Flame City Arbor's earlier commotion at the Mu residence's mountain gate had clearly alarmed everyone in the Mu residence. Old Master Mu also rushed over after hearing the news. After seeing his little granddaughter's expressionless stoic face, he keenly sensed that this little stoic's attitude seemed to be a bit different from before. Family head Mu wrote me a letter and told me to come collect Chaoyang Pavilion's reward. Arbor nodded indifferently at Old Master Mu. Sorry to disturb you. Old Master Mu's heart involuntarily skipped a beat when he saw her cold and desolate expression. He seemed to be able to sense that his little granddaughter was even more distant and apathetic than before. He still remembered that his little granddaughter didn't have this iceberg appearance on the day of the birthday banquet. At that time, whether it was the way she looked at people or the way she spoke, it was not as sharp and cold as it was now. It was as if everything had returned to the starting point overnight. This little fellow seemed to have returned to the past. When he looked at the Mu family, there was no warmth in his eyes. The old man couldn't help but feel a sense of loss, but he quickly adjusted his mentality and nodded at Arbor. I'll take you there. Arbor responded faintly. He moved and followed the old man for a few steps before stopping in front of Hua Shi, who was watching the commotion. The little crown princess took out a debt note from her inner world and tossed it to the 5th branch's wife. Without saying anything, she left with the old man. 5th sister-in-law, what did the crown prince consort give you? Mu Dongni leaned over to take a look curiously. Then she cried out in surprise. Pink House's debt. Hua Shi also pursed her lips and abruptly raised her head to look at the little crown princess's departing figure. But at this time, the little crown princess had already left with the old man, leaving behind only the corners of her moon-white clothes, which glided past the flower bushes at the corner. Mu Dongni looked at Hua Shi with a complicated expression and muttered to herself, Hey, what kind of person is this crown princess? She clearly didn't speak more than 2 sentences to 5th sister-in-law Hua Shi, but she actually came forward to resolve such a troublesome matter as the pink house for Hua Shi. But say she really cared about kinship. Chapter 3581. Old Master Mu turned around to look at his granddaughter's cold and indifferent expression. He felt slightly uncomfortable, so he said, Jojo, don't worry. Grandpa will go find someone now and help you. No need. Arbor coldly refused. Her gaze circled the empty space in front of her, before finally landing on the stone tablet at the side of the courtyard. This stone tablet was very inconspicuous. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't notice it erected here. She curiously walked over and stood in front of the stone tablet to take a look. 99 horizontal lines were clearly engraved on the stone tablet. At this moment, the 3 horizontal lines at the bottom were glowing red, and there were actually small words flashing next to them. Arbor took a closer look and saw that the small words next to the horizontal lines were actually the names of a few people. They were Mu Ro-yen, and Mu Jiating. Arbor had heard of this Mu Jiating before. It was said that he was a genius talisman master from a branch family. He was only 23 years old and was already a perfected yellow-level talisman master. This Mu Jiating, who was only a step away from becoming a black-level great talisman master, was able to obtain a spot to enter Chaoyang Pavilion. But Mu Ro-yen and Mu Ro-yen, with their advanced level talisman master standards, they could enter Chaoyang Pavilion? How could there not be anything fishy about this? When old Master Mu saw his granddaughter's gaze carefully landing on the names, his old face couldn't help but redden slightly. He couldn't help but lightly cough and say, "These two children have made great progress recently. Especially Ro Yin. She is about to enter the yellow-level talisman master realm." Arbor meaningfully glanced at the old man and mockingly said, "This Mu Ro Yin. It seems that she hasn't even reached the advanced level talisman master standard, right? If such a person could obtain the qualifications to enter Chaoyang Pavilion, then there wasn't much interest in whether she could enter Chaoyang Pavilion or not." Old Master Mu instantly felt a slight burning pain on his face. Mu Ro Yan's talisman drawing standards weren't that great, but the candidates to enter Chaoyang Pavilion were ultimately decided by his son, Mu Jingfeng. The old man hadn't been in charge of anything for many years, so he didn't think too much about it. Now that his granddaughter had pointed it out, his old face burned. He heard that when Mu Ro Yin entered Chaoyang yesterday, she was holding a rare purple talisman message talisman, which actually made old ancestor Chaoyang look at her in a new light. It was rare that he did not kick her out. Although the old man was also a little surprised, the matter had already been settled, and there was nothing he could do. Could it be that he could rush in and beat Mu Ro Yin out and accuse her of cheating? Arbor turned around and was about to leave. "In that case, it doesn't matter if we enter or not." "Hey, wait, Jojo." Grandpa Mu hurriedly stopped her and said, "I'm going to find him now. You wait here for a while. You definitely have the qualifications to enter Chaoyang restaurant. No one in the family can stop you from going in. You've already given these 3 places to others. It seems like the previous competition was merely a formality." Xiao Mu gazed at this old geezer mockingly. "Back then, you were the one who said that only 3 people could enter Chaoyang Pavilion every year, right?" "Yes, that's true, but Jojo, this was the rightful winner of the family competition. If she couldn't enter Chaoyang Pavilion, who else in the family could?" Chapter 3582. Old Master Mu glared at Xiao Tang with an ugly expression and said, "Jojo, don't go. Stay here and wait for Grandpa. 15 minutes, no, 15 minutes, 15 minutes will be enough. Wait for me." Old Master Mu flew up and disappeared from Arbor's sight in a few leaps. Xiao Mu knew in her heart that this old man had gone to find those elders, but there was still no ripple of interest in her eyes. She stared at the 3rd horizontal line on the stele, and walked to the back of the stele to take a look. She realized that there were many names floating behind the stele. For example, Mu Xingchen's name indicated that he had broken through to the 58th floor. Mu Yuanyuan was on the 29th floor. It seemed that each horizontal line represented a floor, and this Chaoyang Pavilion probably had 99 floors? Now that the horizontal line on the 3rd floor was lit up, did that mean that one of the 3 people had reached the 3rd floor? But she heard that they had already entered the Chaoyang Pavilion yesterday. They only reached the 3rd floor after a day and a night? Didn't that mean that Mu Xingchen had to stay on the 58th floor for 2 to 3 months? Arbor couldn't help but chuckle. She turned around, and anger flashed through her cold eyes. "Why are you still standing here? Scram!" That youth called Xiao Tang was currently cowering on the side, while keeping an eye on Xiao Mu. When he heard the young crown prince consort shout, he also got a fright, and he retreated a few steps. Arbor was about to leave when she suddenly felt the cypress jade bracelet on her wrist heat up. "Huh, what's up with the bracelet today?" She looked down and saw that the bracelet on her wrist suddenly emitted a soft light. "This light? Why does it look like it?" Arbor's heart skipped a beat. Before she had time to think, she felt the scenery in front of her flash past her. The space changed. When she opened her eyes again, she was already in a vast grassland. Arbor stared blankly at the dark green grassland in front of her. She blinked and closed her eyes, chanting 3 times in her heart, "Illusion array break." When he opened his eyes again, he was still in that vast grassland. Behind her came the sound of a herd of animals running. Sir Jojo turned around to take a look, and quickly flew into the air. She looked at the large herd of antelopes spreading like a flood under her feet, with a dumbfounded expression. "Damn, this green grass and blue sky is too realistic." By the time the large herd of antelopes ran over, 15 minutes had already passed. Xiao Mu floated down to the ground in exasperation. She looked around her in a daze as she surveyed the boundless grassland around her. What was she doing? Did he enter Chaoyang restaurant? Arbor looked down at the bracelet in his hand. This bracelet was the key to opening the Holy Water Sect's Maple Pavilion's secret location. What did it have to do with Morning Sun Pavilion? The only connection was back then. The talisman matrix outside the Holy Water Sect's Maple Pavilion was also set up by Patriarch Chaoyang. Could it be the key? Could it be used? Enter all the talisman arrays set up by old ancestor Zhaoyang? So to speak, the seemingly empty yard outside was actually set up with multiple layers of concealment and defense rune arrays? It was just that she couldn't see through them, with her current talisman energy level? Sir Jojo blinked. Was there such a coincidence? Outside, Old Master Mu hurried over with Elder Qing and the others. He immediately saw Little Soup standing in the empty yard like a block of wood. Why are you the only one here? Where's Jojo? Rascal, don't tell me you said something you shouldn't have again and made Jojo leave in anger. Chapter 3583. Old Master Mu scolded him. Xiao Tang, on the other hand, pointed to the front in astonishment. He opened his mouth and looked at Old Master Mu in a daze. What's with that expression? Why are you pointing there? Old Master Mu roared at him. Speak. Old Master. Mu Zitong hurriedly said. Yes, she went in by herself. What? Old Master Mu and Elder Qing couldn't help but cry out and look at Mu Zitong with strange eyes. Elder Qing hurriedly asked. Xiao Tang, what's going on? Tell us clearly. Grandpa, just now, I was standing here with the Crown Princess. Crown Princess, look at me standing here, and you're telling me to scram. What? What right does she have to tell you to get out? Elder Qing's face immediately darkened. Xiao Tang was his grandson. Even if the Crown Princess had a noble status, she didn't have much status in the Mu family. How dare a foreign girl tell his grandson to get out? How dare she? Old Master Mu roared. What are you talking about? Get to the point. Elder Qing shut his mouth with a dissatisfied look. Mu Zitong hurriedly said. I had just taken a few steps back when I saw a barrier appear behind the Crown Princess. Then a door opened in the middle and sucked the Crown Princess in just like that. At that time, the Crown Princess's body was full of splendor, so no one could see what was going on clearly. In any case, the Crown Princess must have entered Chaoyang Pavilion. Mu Zitong said with certainty. Impossible. Elder Qing waved his hand and denied it with a look of disbelief. Chaoyang Pavilion has never opened its door by itself. That's right. Every time, we work together to open a gap for the children to get in. It can only be opened once or twice a year. How could it be possible this time? Old Master Mu waved his hand to interrupt the elders. Since Xiao Tang saw it with his own eyes, it must be true. Even though Jojo has entered Chaoyang Pavilion, I still have to explain everything that happened before. Mu Tsong glared angrily at the family elders. You all are elders of the Mu family. You've been in the Mu family for several tens of years. You should know the rules of the Mu family very well. No matter what, Jojo is still a daughter of the Mu family. Since she won the competition, you shouldn't have made things difficult for her, and even did such a thing. I don't need to ask to know who instigated all of this. Jing Feng is muddle-headed, but as elders, are you as muddle-headed as him? After Mu Tsong finished speaking, he turned around and left. You guys stay here and watch over this place. If there are any strange movements in Chaoyang restaurant, come and report to me. As he spoke, he walked out of the empty courtyard and ordered in a deep voice, Go and call the patriarch over. This Mu Jingfeng's way of doing things was truly disappointing him more and more. Back then, wasn't the decision to hand over the entire Mu clan to him a little too hasty? Elder Qing and the others looked at each other in dismay, before all of them walked toward the stone tablet. Xiao Tang, is what you said earlier true? Grandson's words are true. Mu Zitong quickly nodded. Elder Qing couldn't help but look puzzled. How is that possible? When did this Patriarch Chaoyang's temper become so good? Elder Qing looked, what's going on here? One of the elders suddenly raised his hand and pointed at the stone tablet, his eyes widening. Chapter 3584. Arbor jumped back and forth on the grassland for a while, before she finally stopped. She reached out to tap her chin and muttered to herself, "It seems that this should be a large-scale talisman array." These antelopes seemed to have gone crazy as they ran back and forth repeatedly, as if they were possessed. Was it probably a repetition talisman? To be able to create such a huge illusion of an antelope herd so generously, there was also a repetition talisman effect inside. Or put it this way. Actually, the entire Chaoyang restaurant was enveloped by a talisman array from the inside out. Once someone stepped into the building, it meant that the test had already begun. It was extremely easy to crack the repetition talisman. A dozen of the unlocking talismans would do. Arbor took out a handful of talisman papers from her pocket. These were what she drew when she first entered the industry. They were all high-level talismans, but they were all useless now. "I'll reward you." She casually threw them out, and a handful of talisman papers flew out with a whoosh. They formed an oval in the air and covered her from top to bottom. The moment the unlocking talisman was thrown out, she disappeared from the grassland. When she opened her eyes again, she was already standing on a small deserted island. From afar, she saw a little old man with his back facing her. He was sitting calmly on the shore fishing. Lord Jojo ran over and happened to see the old man catch a big, lively fish from the sea. Without a word, the little fellow pounced over and hugged the fish. She casually grabbed a rock from the ground and smashed the fish's head with 2 bangs. The old man stood up from the rock and pointed at Arbor. He was so angry that his old face was distorted. You. Arbor slowly took out a jade talisman from the fish's stomach and waved at the old man. "See you at the next stage." As her fingertips moved, the jade talisman instantly shattered. The little person also disappeared from the shore of the deserted island with a whoosh. The old man stared blankly at the scene in front of him. After a while, he closed his mouth and muttered to himself, This? Where did this monster come from? What kind of sharp eyes did he have? He could actually see that the core array talisman was in the fish's stomach. The old man also disappeared with a whoosh. At this time, Arbor had already passed through 7 levels and arrived in front of a small garden with richly ornamented beams and painted rafters. As soon as she opened the door, she saw red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and purple. The 7-colored man was sitting in the courtyard. When they heard the sound of the door being pushed open, they all turned around and gave her a flirtatious look while waving the handkerchiefs in their hands. Arbor felt a chill run down his spine. She hurriedly apologized, "Wrong way," and slammed the door shut. Then, he stared blankly at the closed door and thought for a moment. "That's not right. I'm not mistaken. This is the place. This old ghost actually dared to set up a beauty illusion array for her. Let's see how she's going to deal with this old fellow." Bang! She kicked the door open and was almost hugged by the beautiful man in red. Arbor immediately swung her hand to slap him, but just as her hand was about to land, she heard the beautiful man's pitiful cry. Don't hit me, Jojo. Arbor focused and looked. Hey! It was actually Jojo's Lotus's aggrieved little face. "It's over." She turned around again and instantly felt dizzy. The red, orange, yellow, green, indigo, and purple beauties in the courtyard had all turned into Jojo's Lotus. This illusion array was really powerful. It could actually make Jojo's Lotus appear. Chapter 3587. What happened? Mu Xingchen hurriedly separated the crowd. Make way. Is my younger sister inside?" Elder Qing turned to look at him and nodded. Xiao Tang said that Arbor went in by herself. Her name also appeared on this stone tablet, so it seems to be true. Even now, he still felt that this matter was shrouded in clouds and fog, making him unable to make head or tail of it. It's the 50th floor. At this moment, there was an uproar in the crowd as everyone stared at the stone tablet in shock. It was as if the stone tablet was not just a tablet but a monster. They wished they could pull out its tendons and peel off its skin to see what was inside. Mu Xingchen hurriedly went forward to take a look. Sure enough, he saw his younger sister's name clearly written on the stone tablet, and the red horizontal lines on the stone tablet had indeed lit up to the 50th floor. Everyone could not help but look at each other in dismay, clearly dumbfounded. If it was as Mu Zitang said, that the little crown princess had only gone in for less than 2 hours, then this was simply a miracle. She took less than 2 hours to reach the 50th floor? Their eyes must be playing tricks on them, right? Bro, come pinch me. See if it hurts. A Mu family disciple could not help but mutter to the person beside him. Subsequently, he was pinched hard, and he screamed like a pig being slaughtered. He then jumped up and shouted, "I'm not dreaming. There really is someone who reached the 50th floor of Chaoyang restaurant in 2 hours. The family head is here. The family head is here." Someone shouted from outside. The two sides immediately gave way, opening up a small path in the middle that could allow one person to pass through. Mu Tsong walked over with a solemn expression, followed by Mu Jingfeng, who swiftly came over. "What's going on?" When Mu Jingfeng saw so many disciples gathered here, his gaze involuntarily sharpened as he displayed the dignity of the Mu family's head. It's the crown princess. And the crown princess entered Chaoyang restaurant. The crown prince consort reached the 50th floor of Morning Sun Pavilion in less than 2 hours. The crown princess is really amazing. I used to say that the eldest young miss was so powerful. Today, I see that the crown princess is the most powerful girl in the family. Yes, the crown princess is simply the Mu family's rarely seen genius in 100 years. Mu Jingfeng glanced at his disciples in astonishment, only to see these Mu family's disciples. Each and every one of them is glowing. Everyone is praising the little crown princess. This left Mu Jingfeng somewhat puzzled. After all, the little crown princess did not get along well with the disciples of the Mu family. Why were all the disciples of the Mu family now whispering that she was powerful, saying that she was the genius of the Mu family, with a hint of worship in their eyes? Boom. As he spoke, a water-green figure was kicked out of the mirage-like barrier. She rolled on the ground awkwardly, and her hairpins fell to the ground with tinkling sounds. "Second miss," someone exclaimed. "It's Miss Ro Yen." Everyone instantly looked strangely at Mu Ro Yen, who was suddenly kicked out of Chaoyang restaurant. They saw that her hairpin and skirt were very messy, and her hair was disheveled and hung down. Her small face was filled with terror, and she kept patting her clothes when she came out. Chapter 3589. Wasn't it because they were both the daughters of the patriarch? So the patriarch had opened a convenient back door for them? Thinking of this, when those youngsters looked at Mu Ro Yen and her sister, their gazes were slightly unkind. A pair of useless trash. And they even took away their quota for nothing, causing those who could stand out to lose their chance. After all, Mu Ro Yin was still young, and had been spoiled since she was young. So how could she bear with other people's gazes? She immediately climbed up shakily, and shouted at the top of her lungs. "It's not my fault, it's not. It's Arbor." Arbor set fire to Chaoyang restaurant, and even fought with the patriarch. If you don't believe me, then go in and take a look. Just as the outside was in a state of chaos, Xiao Mu was currently sprinting madly through a bamboo forest. She chased after the stooped figure in front of her, while continuously throwing out explosion talismans. That old man was running in front, panting and shouting as he ran. "Great-grandson, I'm telling you, great-grandfather, stop immediately. I'm telling you, great-grandson, you're committing treason, deceiving your master and destroying your ancestors." The old man's head was hit by a winter fruit thrown by Sir Jojo. Staggering forward a few steps, the old man cried out pitifully, "Great-grandfather was just joking with you. Did you have to chase me from the 18th floor all the way to the 58th floor? You're the girl with the highest talisman skills in my Mu clan for 1,000 years. It's not unreasonable for you to marry a promiscuous husband, Io. Why do you keep hitting the old man? Let me tell you. In the past, there was a lady called Lady Qingqing in our clan. She married 7 husbands and gave birth to many children. This child can't be taught. Didn't I just set up an illusion array for you? You've already destroyed them, so why are you still chasing after this old man? Don't you know in the 3 continents whoever has the biggest fist is right? No matter if it's a male or female cultivator. As long as you're powerful enough. You You can marry as many as you want. Stop hitting me, great-grandson. I'm telling you. If you hit me again, great-grandfather will really get angry. This old man was full of nonsense all the way, and he didn't even pant when he said these words. With a wave of his hand, Arbor uprooted countless bamboos and threw them at the old man's head. Hey! Her great-grandson wanted to kill her great-grandfather. This rebellious little thing. Don't think that your great-grandfather is a paper tiger. If your great-grandfather really gets angry, your whole family will be in trouble. Pung. More than 10 bamboos were thrown in succession. The old man hurriedly covered himself with a defensive barrier. Along the way, he was smashed by the bamboo and kept flying forward. He kept shouting, Hey! Great-grandfather won't joke about this with you in the future, okay? Just how many talismans did this little pervert have on him? From the moment he stepped into Chaoyang restaurant until now, he had been throwing out talismans non-stop. It was as if there was an endless supply of talismans. The old man hurriedly waved his hand, and his figure suddenly shot to the top of the bamboo forest. After a few ups and downs, his shadow disappeared. This old man was really infuriating. The little fellow ran to the side of the bamboo forest. She raised her head and scanned the surroundings. Then, she stopped in her tracks while panting with rage. Her gaze swept around, and then several jade talismans appeared in her hand. She quickly flicked them out. In a short moment, a ripple-shaped whirlpool appeared in the center of the jade talismans. Chapter 3591. Although he couldn't figure out the use of the black Ganoderma lucidum, he could tell it was a divine-level medicinal herb with his many years of experience. He had been inexplicably sucked into the ground by that disc array. After going through so much trouble, he had finally not wasted his efforts. He had even obtained such a pure and natural divine-level medicinal herb for his wife. It could be said that this trip was not in vain. Thinking of this, the crown prince was in a good mood. He carefully dug out the black Ganoderma lucidum from the cliff and put it into an empty jade box. Emolien raised his hand and patted the cliff lightly. Like a dragon piercing the moon, he landed lightly on the ground. Your Highness! A surprised cry came from behind. The moment Emolien turned around, he threw out a black flame. The black flame moved on the ground like a wriggling black snake. It suddenly spread to the feet of the woman, who was shocked. Little Seven, kill her. Emolien ordered with a cold expression. Shani Su, who was panicking and retreating rapidly, was so frightened that her pupils shrank. In the process of retreating, she accidentally stepped on a piece of raised gravel. Shani Su only felt that her leg was twisted and she fell to the ground. With tears in her eyes, Shani Su looked up at Prince Emo, who was not far away, in panic. Your Highness, what are you? Shani Su hurriedly rolled on the ground and barely avoided Yin Qi's punch. The punch suddenly turned into a giant dragon claw and scratched at Shani Su's face without saying anything. Shani Su widened her eyes in horror, and her heart was beating wildly. She finally understood that the crown prince was not joking with her. The crown prince was really going to kill her. But why? What kind of person was the crown prince of the divine land? Did anyone know that he was so cold and heartless? How could he do such a vicious thing to a flower-like girl? Shani Su hurriedly rolled on the ground several times to avoid the dragon claw that suddenly stamped on the ground. She screamed and crawled backward. Suddenly, Shani Su tore a talisman in her hand and made a prompt decision. Her figure suddenly disappeared from the spot. Bang! Yin Qi's dragon claw landed on the place where Shani Su disappeared. He turned into a human and scratched his little head with a puzzled expression. He turned to look at the crown prince behind him. Why did she run away? Emolien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He thought, if she didn't run away, would she wait to be trampled to death by you? He walked to the child, who had a huge appearance, but was only an innocent teenager. He raised his hand and patted his head. Well, it seems that she won't come to us casually in the future. Look around and see if there's a way out. Seventh Yin nodded hard and turned into a small dragon. It then climbed up the cliff. Meanwhile, Crown Prince Emo wandered around the bottom of the valley, mainly because he wanted to see if there were any good medicinal herbs that had been overlooked. If there were any good medicinal herbs, he would dig them up for his wife. His wife would definitely be overjoyed. Needless to say, after he wandered around the valley, he really did find a few stalks of medicinal herbs that were in good condition. Thus, he put them all away and felt that he had gained a lot from this trip. At this moment, a series of crashing sounds came from the top of the cliff. Emolien looked up and saw the little dragon flying out with a whoosh. Chapter 3592. It was followed by a green vine that wrapped itself around Seventh Yan's body and pulled him back. Seventh Yan roared in exasperation. His body instantly inflated as if it was filled with air. He struggled to break free from the vine that was wrapped around him and turned back to roar angrily in the direction of the cliff. Instantly, the rocks on the cliff rolled down. Emolien stood at the bottom of the valley and leaped up a few times to avoid the rocks that rolled down the cliff. He leaped up the cliff and quickly came to Seventh Yan's side. At this moment, Seventh Yan had already transformed into his human form. He angrily ran to his side and shouted, "Master, master! There's a cave over there. There's a demon in the cave." Emolien did not know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at the little fellow. He raised his hand and patted his head. "I saw a green vine just now." As he spoke, Emolien felt his wrist move, and the vine branch of the sapling Chochio that he had originally kept in his sleeve abruptly shot out. The upper half of the vine was slightly raised and swayed left and right in midair, as if it was sensing something. Emolien glanced sideways at the vine, and his heart skipped a beat. The vine was suspended in midair for a few seconds before it suddenly rushed toward the cliff in front. The green silhouette entered a cave on the cliff in no time. This cave was surrounded by many vines and grass. If one did not look carefully, one would not be able to discover that there was a cave here. Emolien immediately summoned Little Seven back and dashed into the cave alone. He followed Chochio's vine and chased after it as fast as lightning. At this moment he had already sensed something. Judging from Chochio's appearance, there was probably a fragment of its seed in this cave. Since that was the case, he had to obtain this fragment. This cave was not big, and was only about 10 meters deep. It was long and thin, and the gap between the two sides of the cliff was very narrow. After he dashed in, he felt his vision darken. Rustling sounds of fighting could be heard from the depths of the long and thin cave. Emolien chased after him, and flicked the 3 luminous pearls in his hand, embedding them into the cliff wall. The warm luster immediately illuminated the depths of the cave, causing the shadows to flicker. On the inner wall of the cave, there was a bunch of thick tree vines. The vines were as thick as an elephant's leg. Hundreds and thousands of vines were tangled together in a mess, looking like a hornet's nest. Emolien stretched out a finger and tentatively released a bunch of black flames. However, before the black fire could spread, he immediately retracted it and walked toward the inner wall. At this moment, the half-vine cut off from Chochio's main body was swaying left and right in front of the cluster of vines. From time to time, he would whip the vines in front of him. If the sapling Chochio could take human form now, it would definitely have a solemn and lecturing face. "How is it?" Emolien didn't know why she was talking to a vine. The rattan branch shook its head and suddenly raised its front half. It rushed over and whipped the large cluster of rattan branches hanging on the inner wall. From the looks of it, it seemed to be communicating with the other party. However, its methods were as violent as ever. Emolien looked speechlessly at the conversation between the vines, feeling that he could not interfere at all. Therefore, he looked around back and forth in the slender cave, sizing it up. He saw that there seemed to be a lot of shiny things under the knotted vines. Chapter 3594. This ball was woven from emerald green tree vines, and looked like it was overflowing with green light. When that bundle of tree vines saw Prince Emo take out this vine ball from its vines, it instantly became somewhat anxious. However, it shook its countless vines and attacked Crown Prince Emo. At this moment, it no longer cared that Chochio's vine was writhing in the air to stop it. As if someone had stepped on its tail, this bundle of tree fragments hurled itself at Emolien in a flurry of attacks. Chochio's vine was unable to stop this little fellow that had suddenly gone berserk. Startled, Emolien hurriedly reached out to block that bundle of tree vines that was attacking her with all their might. She shifted a few steps away and lowered her head to look at the little green vine ball in her hand. This vine ball's outer layer was wrapped in rings of vines, and she could not see what was inside at all. But it was this little vine ball that made this little tree fragment so anxious that it wanted nothing more than to fight her to the death. Emolien speechlessly poked at that little vine ball and raised her head to look at the tree fragment that was whipping towards her feet. Hey, I'm not trying to snatch your things. He also felt that this was rather strange at this moment. Previously, this fellow did not react at all when he pulled out a large pile of holy stones from under its tree vines. Who would have thought that just by taking a small ball of rattan, he would be able to stimulate the seed fragment? Could it be that there was something strange about this little vine ball? Emolien lowered her head and shook the little ball in her hand, releasing a strand of divine sense into that vine ball. However, it seemed to have hit some kind of barrier and was almost bounced back out. This time, Prince Emo felt even more strange. He simply took a few steps forward and stroked that bundle of tree vines as if to comfort it. All right, don't be nervous. I'm not going to hurt it. I'm just going to see what this is. Chochio's branch climbed to the top of the bundle of tree vines and whipped it hard, as if warning it not to act rashly. Although the tree vines were unconvinced and still wanted to whip student Emolien, they obediently stopped after being whipped by Chochio's branch. However, at this moment, it crawled down from the inner wall. From the center of that bundle of tree vines, a little green person the length of an arm crawled out and crawled to Emolien's side like a baby, forcefully rubbing against his robe. Emolien had already sat down leaning against the mountain wall. When he saw the little green figure approaching, he picked it up and threw it onto his shoulder. I'll bring you back later. Your master will definitely be very happy to see you. Emolien patted the little green person's head. This little thing already had a nose and eyes, and had transformed into the appearance of a small person. However, his small face was still green, and he looked a little frightening. The little green man shook its limbs, seemingly trying to stop Emolien from peeling off the rattan ball with all its might. What's the hurry? Let's see what it is. Emolien patted it exasperatedly, casually clearing away the layers of vines wrapping around the vine ball. Inside, she revealed a bundle of green, sparkling and translucent object. It was like a ball of water that had congealed into a paste, wrapped into a round ball, and gently bounced on Emolien's palm. When Chochio's branch saw this object, it immediately rushed over. At the last second before it almost collided with the object, Emolien reached out and held it tightly in her hand. Chochio's vine jumped restlessly in Emolien's hand, as if it was very excited. However, Emolien could not be bothered with this little thing at this time. Chapter 3596. He pointed to a piece of holy stone in his hand and poked its little head, meaning that he wanted it to tell him where the holy stone was dug out. In the end, this little green man looked at him with a confused face for a long time, twisting its buttocks and waist, but it still did not know how to open its mouth to speak. This was originally a little thing that had just awakened its spiritual intelligence. Compared to the previous few pieces of tree seed fragments, it was far inferior. It had been hanging in the cave on the cliff all day, and no one taught it to speak, so naturally it did not know how to communicate. Emolien was at his wit's end. Thinking that today's harvest was quite rich, and nothing could be forced, he could only give up. Perhaps he could first record this location, and when he got out, he could call someone in to investigate. Emolien came out of the slender cave and flew to the top of the cliff. Looking into the distance, he could only see a continuous stretch of mountain walls, and at a glance he could not see the end. Suddenly, from the crevice of the mountain walls, a pitch-black long snake drilled out, opening its mouth and biting towards Emolien's left hand. A vine suddenly shot out from Emolien's sleeve, and with a paw, it hit the snake. That black snake hissed twice, twisted twice, and suddenly burst into flames. Following the black snake's body burst into flames, An indescribable strange smell drifted over with the wind. Emolien's body swayed slightly, and his footsteps were unsteady as he retreated a few steps. That strange smell was very strong, and in a short while, it completely filled up the entire area. He had just raised his sleeve to cover his mouth and nose, when he staggered a few more steps back, and then his whole body seemed to have lost the support of his bones, and softly fell to the ground. Time seemed to have frozen. Emolien fell to the ground in a daze, as if he did not have the slightest bit of strength. Only his slender fingers moved slightly a few times. About a quarter of an hour later, a pair of light embroidered shoes came out from the other side of the cliff and walked briskly to his side. At this moment, Prince Mo's eyes were slightly closed, as if there was only a faint light in his eyes. He looked so weak that it seemed like he could not even open his eyelids. Refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. You're finally acting weird now. Sha Nisu appeared beside Crown Prince Emo with a contorted expression and slowly crouched down. Her beautiful eyes flashed with the light of determination to win. She had said before that as long as she wanted something, she would be able to get it no matter what method she used. She had taken a fancy to this man. It was such a good opportunity. Even if she had nothing to do, she had to do something for him. She pursed her lips and smiled at the man on the ground. She raised her hand and was about to touch his handsome face with his thin lips tightly pursed. Sha Nisu suddenly felt a chill in her heart. She was shocked and looked down. He saw a shiny dagger stabbed into his chest, and a soft and warm red blood was gushing out from the wound. Saint-Clothed Su was flustered. He screamed and covered the dagger in his chest. He stood up and took a few steps back. When he raised his eyes again, he saw that Prince Emo had already climbed up from the ground. A pair of dark phoenix eyes were emitting a gloomy cold light, staring straight at him. Saint-Clothed Su felt a chill in her bones, and her whole body could not help but tremble. He did not fall for it. Emolien lifted his hand to brush off the dust on his clothes, and coldly stared at the woman in front of him. He sneered mockingly. "Little ant, how dare you plot against me?" Chapter 3597. His special ability medicinal power had now broken through to heaven rank. What was the level of a heaven-level pharmacist? Invulnerable to poison? No, it should be the level of invulnerable to poison. For example, Ding Ting Ding once gave him the neurotoxin of the devil grass. If it was now and Ding Ting Ding used this poison on him, he could just casually use the medicinal power to make him suffer the consequences of his own actions. It was that simple. People didn't know that their crown prince of Shenzhou had long been a rare heaven-level pharmacist. You probably couldn't find more than 5 yellow-level pharmacists in the upper 3 provinces, not to mention a heaven-level pharmacist. Wang Dongping of Huiping Village, who had used so many corpse puppets to gain experience, was now only an advanced pharmacist. He was still far away from the yellow level. The efficacy of an advanced pharmacist could control the corpse poison in the human body to a certain extent. There were very few apothecaries. Otherwise, Crown Prince Emma wouldn't cherish a mere advanced-level apothecary like Wang Dongping. Therefore, Sha Nisu was simply overestimating herself by showing off her venomous snake and wanting to use this kind of poison to deal with the Crown Prince. Sha Nisu's fingers covering her chest couldn't help but twitch and tremble. The gaps between her fingers were filled with blood, dripping down in streams, causing her face to instantly become incomparably pale. Your Highness." Single-clothed Su staggered back step by step, murmuring to beg for mercy. Yes, it's Susu who was blinded by pig oil. Susu knows she's wrong. I beg you, let me go this time. Emolien coldly stared at the woman in front of him. This was the first time that a man looked at her with such a focused gaze. Sha Nisu didn't feel happy at all. Instead, the suppressed fear in her heart grew bigger and bigger. She was so scared that her legs trembled. She turned around, clutching her chest and barely holding her breath to rush down the cliff. In the blink of an eye, a long and slender whip made of black flames darted out from behind her and landed on half of her body with a pop sound. Her skin and flesh were split open, and a long bloody mark appeared on her back. Sha Nisu turned her head in horror and looked at Emolien, who was slowly walking towards her. She cried out involuntarily, You can't kill me. You can't kill me. I'm a divine-level pill master. Her short-circuited brain seemed to have suddenly been reconnected as she quickly took out a lot of pills from her inner world and swallowed them one by one. She said to Emolien with a lisp, I can save your mother. If you kill me, I won't die. But you don't even care about your mother's life? Emolien gazed at her indifferently. Oh, you can save the Empress? Yes. As long as I find the Phoenix Wood remote ghost grass, snow region flower, and jade blood vermilion fruit, I can gather the ingredients to refine the soul-returning pill for your mother. I can 10%. Emolien interrupted her with an indifferent expression and said coldly, with your current pill-refining realm, the success rate of refining the soul-returning pill is only 10%. A 10% success rate was equivalent to giving her a pile of good herbs to waste. It was as difficult as ascending to heaven to refine it successfully. No. Shani Su's pupils contracted. I'm useful. I'm still useful, Your Highness. Chapter 3598. You're useless. Emolien coldly interrupted her. He raised his hand and countless black flames jumped on his fingertips. Alchemist Shan, he said coldly, you shouldn't have provoked me again and again. She knew now. She knew that this man really hated her to the extreme. Even if she walked by his side, it seemed that she was not allowed to. Yes, she was too conceited. She thought that she was a dignified divine great alchemist. Even if the crown prince didn't give face to the monk, he would give face to the Buddha. He would definitely favor her. She didn't expect that the crown prince was such a crown prince. She was killed by her own conceit. Shani Su covered the wound on her chest. Her eyes were dark and hard to understand. Undercurrents were surging. If you kill me, my master won't let you off. My life card is in the City of Shadows. My master is the City of Shadows. Third City Lord. If you kill me, my master will definitely not let you off. Emolien gazed at her coldly, and with a flip of his hand, a giant palm formed from black fire pressed down on her face. I really have a way to save your mother. Shani Su shouted with a trace of fierceness. The huge palm formed by the black flames had already covered her face. Shani Su's heart was in a mess. She was anxious, angry. She was now in the prime of her life. Her future was limitless. How could she be willing to die like this? She struggled to throw out an object and roared with a distorted expression. Since you want me to die, then accompany me to die. This damned man didn't give her any face. He would pay the price for his arrogance. On the road to the Yellow Springs, he would become her stepping stone. The huge palm of black flames suddenly slapped the place where Shani Su was lying. At the same time, the red stone that Shani Su threw out completely exploded. A huge heat wave rolled out from the inside of the stone and engulfed the two people. A loud bang exploded in Emolien's ears. That huge force sent him flying several feet away. This was followed by a series of rocks rolling down the cliff. The entire cliff was shaken by a strong force and trembled violently. Prince Emo subconsciously levitated into the air. When he looked down, he saw that the woman's figure had already been crushed by countless rocks. A suction force came from under his feet. Emolien's expression turned cold as she was pulled down a few feet. However, he quickly stabilized his body and looked down coldly at Shani Su, who was completely buried by a large pile of rubble. He frowned slightly. The firearm that Shani Su threw out at the last moment was very powerful. If he was not wrong, it should be the fire glaze from the City of Shadows. It was said that the fire glaze in the City of Shadows was divided into 9 grades according to its power. He had once used 3 grade 9 fire-colored glass to destroy a small town, killing more than 1,000 cultivators. He didn't know what grade the fire glaze in Shani Su's hand was. She used this fire glaze to tell Emolien that she was indeed from the City of Shadows and didn't lie to him. Who knew that Emolien didn't care who she was and dealt with her as he should. The cliff that they were standing on was now being destroyed by the fire glaze. Pieces of the cliff were sliding down the cliff. That strange suction force came from under Emolien's feet again. Chapter 3599. It appeared that the formation disk that sucked him into the depths of the ground was still in effect. After Emolien's body was pulled down several dozen feet, she stopped and hovered in midair. At this moment, he was only a few meters away from the craggy ground below. As for Shani Su's figure, he had already been completely buried by the falling rocks from the giant peak. Emolien pondered silently as he hovered in that direction. If his conjecture was correct, it seemed that he could only leave this place by finding where the formation disk had sunk and shattering it. Otherwise, he would be trapped here by the formation disk suction force. Prince Emo raised his hand and released 2 golems. He coldly said, "Follow me. My Chiao's section break, my good granddaughter. Don't resent your great-grandfather for nagging. It's mainly because you don't like to talk, right?" The old man followed closely behind Xiao Mu the entire time as he prattled on. "You said that old woman from the Holy Water sect is your grandmaster. Then in that case, we already had a rather deep relationship back when we were in the Holy Water sect. After all, this old man also guided that old woman back then. Speaking of which, I can be considered half a master to that old woman." The old man smugly clasped his hands behind his back and faced the sky. Seeing Arbor abruptly turn around to stare at him, the old man reflexively crossed his arms in front of his chest and stammered, "Gunna, don't throw explosion talismans again. I'm telling you, my Morning Sun Pavilion has been passed down for many years. It can't withstand your careless throwing of explosion talismans. If you don't use these explosion talismans well, and it attacks Morning Sun Pavilion, the entire Morning Sun Pavilion's barrier will collapse. Then what will great-grandfather give you to inherit in the future? Don't you think so? You old geezer, it's like you haven't spoken to anyone in several hundred years. Why are you so garrulous?" Xiao Mu turned around and continued walking forward. She passed through the bamboo forest and stopped beside a stream. Hey, the old man hastily jogged to her side and said indignantly, "Child, how can you talk about great-grandfather like that? I'm telling you, it's not that great-grandfather is long-winded. You are the one who doesn't talk much." Xiaomu cast him a sidelong glance and chuckled. The old man clasped his hands behind his back and said happily, "I've waited for so many years, and I finally waited for you. In the future, I'll leave Chaoyang restaurant to you." "What do you mean?" Arbor turned his head and glanced at him. The old man blew his beard and glared. "You still don't understand? You have my universal jade talisman in your hand. As long as it's a treasure ground with a talisman array that I set up, you can enter it. This..." Arbor lifted his wrist, and a round jade bracelet appeared in front of the old man's eyes. The old man looked at the pine and cypress carved on the jade bracelet and sighed. He stroked his beard and said, "Back then, this old man carved it bit by bit. This jade bracelet can open all the immortal abodes that the old man left on the divine land. How is it, my dear grandson? Do you feel the bliss of a pie falling from the sky?" Arbor shook his head. "You experts like to use some immortal abodes that are of little value to lure people into working for you. After taking your benefits, I naturally have to work for you." Arbor glanced at him coldly. "Unfortunately, I don't have time. I don't deserve a reward for nothing. Those things, I feel like they're hot to the touch, so I don't want them." The old man suddenly had the urge to vomit blood. What's going on? Children these days are actually so hard to deceive.